The protagonist's first memory was being blessed by a crowd of people. The father was looking at the girl with a smile, and the mother was tossing her around. The mother was telling the girl that she didn't want to give birth to her and didn't want to see her again. Rumors spread that the newborn goddess almost died, and she resembled her father. A carrier named Andrian was sailing down the river and noticed Mrs. Pauline on the shore and greeted the girl. She cried out to the man that he had been working since very early in the day. Adrian replied that death had no time. The men in the boat said that it was the end, and now they had to live here. Adrian told the girl that Hades hasn't been coming in here at all lately. The girl replied that her father was busy right now, and someone had quit their job in favor of fun. Adrian told the protagonist that she needed time to recover. The protagonist didn't want to discuss it further, and as she jumped into the boat to the carrier, she noticed that all the dead men were fit and looked like fighters. Pauline assumed that a war had broken out somewhere. The men tried to figure out who the girl was, and she seemed nice to them. The protagonist realized they were talkers who had no commander. Pauline stood in front of the dead men and thought that they had good physical strength, but then realized that she was wrong, because they had died since morning and, in addition, fell into the underworld. The protagonist asked the men if they were weaklings. The dead men called Pauline an insolent wench and said that she just doesn't know who they are, and on the battlefield they have no equal. The protagonist explained that they were already dead, but one of the men aggressively attacked Paulina with a knife and said he would help the girl close her mouth. In the underworld, everyone was already dead and has absolutely no knowledge of who you were before, what your personal qualities are. None of this is even worth a stone lying on the road. The protagonist raised her index finger, and the attacking man could no longer move his body. His words of glory and power were like a dog barking and meant nothing. The protagonist told the dead men that they would see each other soon anyway, and it was better that she liked them initially. Pauline announced that they would now go to the fields of Asphodel and that land belonged to her. The protagonist heard no response to her words and turned around to look at the dead men. The girl realized that they could not move or speak. She laughed and snapped her fingers, lifting the spell. The men cheered. The dead men asked the protagonist who she was. Pauline replied that she was the daughter of death itself, the goddess of resurrection. For centuries, goddesses have been mysterious and noble. The goddess noticed that men had become weaker and asked the men if they were proficient with a sword and how many ways to kill people at one time. The men looked at the girl in bewilderment. They, still, could not believe it. Pauline told the men to follow her, and whoever would not listen would be fed to Cerberus. One of the dead men pointed his finger in the distance and asked what was shining there. The protagonist replied that it was Elysium, and she herself had never been there. It was where Anna lived. The men wanted to know all the details and asked why it was like that, but the protagonist replied that they shouldn't care. Anna was the goddess that Hades fell in love with at first sight. Anna did not give Hades a single smile, and the reason for that was that she never wanted to be around that man. She talked about how there was a place in the underworld where only heroes go. Anna asked that Elysium be entrusted to her and never look for her again. She asked that neither Hades nor her daughter ever look for her again, for Anna did not wish to see them. The goddess of pain and worry named Alexandra said that no indulgence should have been given and worried about something terrible happening. A goddess of discord named Alice replied that Pauline was back in Tartarus and should have gone after her. Alexandra was indignant that Pauline never listened to them. There were many more gods in the underworld than one might think. Edward, the god of eternal darkness, was asked to say something about it. Originally, all the gods had lived in their palaces, and each had found something to entertain themselves. After a little thought, the man said that all children at that age acted out. Alexandra said that no god would smash skulls and play with a Cerberus tail tied in a knot. When Pauline was born, all the gods gathered in one place and waited for her. One of the gods said that at that age, Hermes had stolen cows from Apollo. Another replied that even compared to Apollo, it was over the top. Alexandra cried and said that Hermes had not been easy. Suddenly, Hermes was at the table, next to the gods who were discussing him. Alexandra was startled. No one had expected to see him here. It was Hermes, the god of news, who said he had dropped by briefly to bring a golden chair at the request of Pauline, who had personally chosen the materials, so the chair was elegant. The god of news said it was a small bribe and asked not to swear too much because Pauline had put a lot of effort into it. The other gods looked on in surprise. Alexandra said that Tartarus was so deep that some of the inhabitants were hard for even Zeus to handle. Alexandra thought that this time they couldn't give a break and had to scold Pauline. The goddess opened her eyes wide and said that they must scold her well. The protagonist walked and pondered aloud that everyone should have gotten a gift by now. Forbidden fruit is always sweet. The current position of Tartarus was at the very bottom of the underworld. Tartarus was where those who angered the gods were sent. Tantalus, Sisyphus, Titanus, Ixion, and other titans. There are few inhabitants here, and their names are easy to name, but the protagonist only knew a few personally. Pauline was warned not to enter the underworld for anything, but of course she didn't listen. It was said that such a small goddess would be wiped into dust very quickly. In the underworld, the protagonist met Tantalus. He looked like a skeleton that was covered with skin. They were not allowed to drink or eat until death. He begged Pauline to give him water and was shivering all over. Tantalus boiled soup from his son and served it to the gods. The protagonist mentally called him a jerk and asked him if he wanted a sip of water. The man had already started to thank her for the water, but God's punishment is undeniable. Pauline poured all the water from the flask onto the floor. Tantalus begged not to leave him. The protagonist asked how long he had left to live. The gods are not so benevolent as to forgive anyone who argues with them or opposes them. Tantalus continued to beg, and Pauline realized that there was no one to give him water. There were far more reckless and great men in this dungeon. The protagonist heard some sound and turned her head. Pauline saw Sisyphus and asked if there was any progress today. He rolled a large, round stone up the mountain with great difficulty. He had fooled Zeus and even the god of death and wanted to live another life. The main character told Sisyphus that his labor was useless because when he rolled the stone up the mountain, it would roll down anyway. This stone was endlessly tried to be rolled up the mountain. Sisyphus lifted the stone to the very top, after which it rolled down again. The man reminded the protagonist that this was no place for little goddesses, and she, in response, reminded him that his occupation and labor were useless. Hades, king of the underworld and the afterlife, sat in his throne and said that man had dared to deceive God. He blamed Thanatos for not performing his duties well. Thanatos lowered his head and said that he was very ashamed and asked Lord Hades to forgive him. He promised the ruler that it would not happen again and that this man would pay for his deeds in full. Sisyphus had defied the gods, and it was astonishing. Pauline ran after him and asked if he would not say hello to her properly. The protagonist asked if he wanted to take a break. Sisyphus explained that all of this was the point of his punishment and told Pauline that apparently she had no business and should be doing some of her own things. The protagonist replied that she was still young, so she had no classes. Sisyphus recommended that the protagonist go home and find something to do. In fact, this underground kingdom was Pauline's home. The girl cried out for the man to at least get some rest. He was silent and would not hold a conversation. Sisyphus said that the gods were always willful. He recalled how one of the gods had taken a young girl from her family and believed that the gods were only guided by their own interests and only pretended to care about people. Sisyphus, having a negative experience, told the protagonist that people like her disgusted him. Pauline thought for a bit and then asked him what he didn't like and told him that she should be admired and told him to try to worship her. People sacrifice animals to worship the gods. Pauline asked Sisyphus if he ever wondered why people killed livestock. The protagonist overheard that Zeus ordered Sisyphus to be dealt with and sent to rot in Tartarus until the end of time. But he was smiling, for he had never yet bowed his head to the gods. It only becomes a punishment when one fears God. The main character told Sisyphus that he would never realize his sin. Looking at him, it was hard to even tell he was human. Pauline said that he would carry that stone for the rest of his life. The girl said it wasn't a bad thing for her. The main character ran merrily around Sisyphus, and he said that nothing could be done with children, and reminded Pauline that it was time for her to go, because Hades would be worried. The girl replied that her father would not be angry. Sisyphus suggested that the mother would be worried, but Pauline replied that it was nothing and she was having fun with Adonis now. The man asked the protagonist if she had any brothers or sisters. The protagonist replied that Adonis was just a man, But lately, her mother had been crazy about him. There were romantic feelings between them. Pauline explained that she was not a child, but a goddess. The protagonist told Sisyphus that 3 days after she was born, she had already learned to walk and talk. Elysium is the place where valiant heroes go, a place of infinite bliss, where Anna stays. She and Adonis embraced and confessed their feelings for each other. The goddess said that if it weren't for Aphrodite, they might have been together forever. Sisyphus did not understand how Anna could leave her husband and be with another. Pauline replied that it happens often when the gods get attached to people they like. The man covered his face with his palm and said it was a nightmare. The protagonist was outraged and asked Sisyphus to stop trying to get her to understand human feelings. Pauline said that she liked her freedom, and the man replied that the girl did not understand what loneliness was, and that was why she was talking about freedom. Sisyphus told the girl that no one would change her mind, for she was a goddess. Pauline lay under a stump and told Sisyphus that they would still see how things would really happen. Suddenly, the protagonist heard Hermes' voice behind her back, saying that Pauline had gone to Tartarus. The protagonist jumped up happily and asked Hermes if he had taken the golden chair away. The girl hoped they weren't too mad. Hermes told the main character that she was still just as tiny and asked when she would grow up. Pauline got angry and said she wasn't tiny. Beside her, just as tiny, was Eros. Gods usually developed in a period of a week to a month. Among them, only 2 failed to grow up. Among them, the only 2 who couldn't grow up were Eros and Pauline. Eros has golden arrows that can awaken love and lead arrows that awaken hate. Psyche was said to be more beautiful than Aphrodite herself, who believed that no one could compare to her, and they should all open their eyes. Aphrodite was the mother of Eros, and one day called her son to her, with a request to do something for her. Eros knew where Psyche lived, and his mother asked him to make her fall in love with the most disgusting man in the world. The main character said that Eros pierced himself with an arrow when he saw Psyche and fell in love with her. He was smitten by her beauty. Hermes told Pauline that he was interested in asking what the point of the story was. The protagonist assumed that the essence is the beauty of Anna. Hermes called the girl silly and said that Eros, struck by Psyche's beauty, pierced himself with a golden arrow and immediately grew. Gods grow when they fall in love, for Eros immediately grew when he fell in love with Psyche. Hermes told the protagonist that she would only grow when she fell in love with someone, and it turns out that the gods immediately know what love is. Pauline was indignant and said that she too knows what love is, and she even has a loved one. Hermes was surprised and asked who this person was. Paulina replied that it was Daddy. The guy said that it was only platonic love, and the protagonist replied that she could marry him too. Hermes wished his niece good luck. Pauline said her mom had an Adonis. The uncle turned the girl's head, and one saw one of the goddesses, who said that Erebus was looking for her and promised to stop Pauline's ass into a trident. The protagonist asked why that was so. The goddess took Pauline's hand and dragged her along and said that no one goes to Tartarus of their own free will, and Erebus is old and not looking for compromise. After his birth, Eros had often seen his mother having fun with other men. Pauline had the same way. She only saw love in the form of grasping, forbidding, and brute force. Hermes believed that there was no way to know what true love was. In front of Mr. Zeus's throne, 2 men were kneeling, and one of them was saying that it was time for them to begin their preparations. At this point, Goddess Alexandra was strongly lecturing the main character, and it was disgusting. The goddess was telling Pauline that the day of the initiation ceremony was already coming up in a week. Alexandra was asking the protagonist why she had gone where she had been told not to go, and she was crying and saying she was worried. Nearby, on the chair that Paulina had given him, Arab sat and pretended not to hear anything. Usually at such moments he stopped Alexandra, but this time, for some reason, he did not do so. The protagonist asked Adrian if this was normal. The carrier now understood the reasons why Paulina was on the boat with him today. The father was getting very worried. The protagonist said that the golden chairs were made by Hephaestus, and, since that was the topic, she confessed that she had something for Adrian. The man was very surprised, and Pauline promised to show them when they returned. The main character is an heiress of gold and jewelry, and had prepared a gift for Adrian. The man asked if by chance his gift was not adorned with precious stones. Pauline was very surprised at such a question and asked Adrian how he knew. The man rattled his oar harder and harder and said that they should go faster. The main character was smiling. Everyone was envious of the golden chairs. Pauline talked about how much she owed Adrian all this time. The protagonist explained that she had commissioned her to do something for Adrian that didn't even compare to the golden chairs. This gift was incomparable to anything. Suddenly, the protagonist stood up, spread her arms out to the sides, and enthusiastically presented Adrian with his new boat. It was made of gold, and the seats were encrusted with diamonds and gold topazes. The protagonist revealed that there was a gold statue of her in the front of the boat. Pauline asked if Adrian liked it and expected rapturous emotions from him. But the man immediately imagined himself floating in that boat. Adrian realized that if the dead saw him in rags and on a gold boat, he would not scare them, but would cause heated discussions about gold. He already imagined them teasing him that he had spent all his money and had no money left for clothes. Adrian said that deep down he was grateful to Paulina, but he couldn't accept the gift. The protagonist talked about how hard Hephaestus had worked to make that boat. Adrian explained that it was heavy and wouldn't carry many dead people. Adrian asked the protagonist if she had talked to Hermes. Pauline explained that he said she didn't know what love was, but she couldn't agree with him and thought she was a goddess full of love. The protagonist said she loved her father's wife, her flirtatious human mother, and silly dead people with fairies senselessly. Even Tantalus and Sisyphus, and also Cerberus. Pauline said she also loved Adrian. The man didn't fully realize whether it was a compliment or not, and he seemed to give way to the dog. The main character reminded him that she never said anything about hating her mother, even though she was irresponsible. Of course, it was definitely not a compliment for Anna, and also everyone knows that she has a soft spot for young, good-looking guys. Pauline said that she didn't think her mom was that bad. The protagonist said it was the opposite. She thought it was her mom who had a problem with hating her daughter. Paulina asked Adrian if her words were convincing. Adrian reminded the girl of the moment when, a few years ago, Psyche had come to the underworld. The girl had said that she had come to borrow some of Mistress Anna's beauty. At that time, the protagonist was surprised and said that she was already much prettier than her mother. There was no need for her to borrow more beauty. Adrian said that instead of her beauty, Anna had put a death sleep in the box. Paulina recalled her saying that Psyche was already beautiful. Adrian explained that it wasn't just that. The hero of men, Pirithoi, wanted Psyche to be his wife, and Theseus thought he had strange taste. Adrian revealed that Anna took it all as a mockery. Paulina realized that her mom had victim syndrome. Adrian said that he had a dream to see Paulina become an adult, and the protagonist was surprised that he was talking about it again and said that she also knows what love is. The girl thought it was a feeling close to sympathy. Adrian explained that love, it is not coercion and control, but the ability to let go. The protagonist asked where love was and thought he was saying things that were too complicated. An angel with huge wings was watching a crowd of girls who were chanting alcohol and having fun. He noticed that it had gotten too quiet around them and was angry that he had done it again. Two guys were sword fighting and the main character was watching from the sidelines, saying that it was interesting because they had been fighting all their lives, and even after death, they continue to swing swords. Paulina was asked who she was betting on this time. The girl answered that she was betting on Telsayu, and although he didn't have a good face, his skills were good. For Pauline, looks were important, and she thought that handsome guys were better. Thanatos, the god of death, approached the protagonist and took the girl's hand. The man asked what the protagonist had behind her back. It was the same golden boat. They lay down in it. Pauline told him that Adrian refused the boat, so she brought it here to sit in it. It was sad, but it couldn't be helped. Thanatos remarked that it was very comfortable and asked why the girl had secretly taken the dead away not long ago. Pauline replied that she was bringing them back later. Thanatos said that the underworld also had its own orders and laws. The girl said that the dead are always transferred across the river Styx by Hadrian on a boat, after which they appear before God's judgment. Pauline said that this judgment considers all the sins that a person has committed during his life and whether he will receive punishment for them. Thanatos told Paulina that it was her job to bring them back to Earth afterward. He was angry and asked why the girl's behavior said otherwise. The god of death told the protagonist that her initiation ceremony would soon take place on Olympus. Once she received the powers of resurrection, she would have to do an important job in the underworld. Henceforth, Pauline was not allowed to behave in this way, even as a joke. Pauline noticed that it was getting too loud downstairs and noticed the crowd of young girls, and they, for some unknown reason, all died and came here. The protagonist wondered if they had killed each other because of their feelings for the same man. There was an assumption that all this happened because of Dionysus, and they got drunk and drowned in the river. It was hard to count how many people died drunk. Thanatos said it was best not to go near them, and they were worshippers of Dionysus. The protagonist wondered why they were called worshippers, because usually the servants of God are called priests. Thanatos replied that these ladies were lured by Dionysus because of their promiscuity. Hermes once asked Paulina if she was giving rides to the dead again. He said that the girl gave them a great fright. The protagonist then thought that she could row an oar as well as Adrian, and they also did a lot of bad things. Hermes then answered the girl that even so, people should be loved and cared for. People also honor the gods, and the gods should look after them. Hermes suggested the protagonist to go to the human world and told about how beautiful it is there, that there is sunshine, beautiful girls, food, and flowers. Pauline replied that up there all good things come to an end one day. Hermes said that the underworld could not fill the soul. It was necessary to love and care. This is every day, the girl was told by other gods. The protagonist liked it very much in the underworld, but the gods, unlike what Pauline thought, are quite different. Thanatos interrupted Pauline's thoughts and said that the gods are not as perfect as she thinks. The protagonist remembered the words of Sisyphus, who told her that everything happens as she wants and as she decides, and people are taken care of only for a tick, and such gods cause only disgust. Pauline told Thanatos that he sounded like one dead man she knew. The day of the main character's initiation ceremony came. Alexandra pondered over how and best to style her hair, for if she overly adorned it, the other goddesses would gossip about it. Alexandra was told to calm down, and she felt that this was not something that could be handled easily. And since Pauline had been drinking her mother's breast milk, this was her first ascent to Olympus, so everything had to be perfect. This was the first time the protagonist had ever seen Thanatos dislike something so much. The girl didn't realize whether Dionysus really kills his female worshippers for fun. People who honor the gods are entitled to grace, and those who defy them are entitled to punishment. Pauline did not know what to do because, as Sisyphus said, no one will say that she is wrong because she is a goddess. The protagonist realized that if she asked Alexandra or anyone else, they would just close the issue and the girl would not be satisfied. People around her saw that Pauline was worried about something and thought that she was probably worried about something unimportant. She decided that she could find out everything on her own if she went to Sisyphus. The protagonist decided to go to Tartarus again. When Pauline first met Sisyphus, she thought he was rather ignorant. He was surprised to see a child goddess, and every time he asked why she was coming to him. He was ridiculous in his constant repetition of meaningless actions. Sisyphus looked pathetic when everything fell down again and looked like a fool. He was saying to the main character that she had atypical behavior for a goddess. Pauline thought that no matter what, she was free. She wondered what someone like Sisyphus was trying to understand here. Suddenly, Sisyphus looked up at the mountain and laughed. Pauline thought that, at last, he had finally lost his mind. The man pointed out to the girl that the top of the mountain was grinding down, and a little more, and he would be able to roll a stone on it. Sisyphus confessed that it was possible to overcome even divine punishment, and the man, who had been screaming with hopelessness, suddenly found a sparkle in his eyes and smiled. He said it was a pity he was not afraid of the gods. Pauline saw what a stupid expression the man had on his face, and he even hummed to himself. The protagonist wondered why Sisyphus was sent to Tartarus, and she saw him so often, but never once asked about it. Pauline always thought in a generalized way that he somehow neglected the gods, and decided that when they met, she would ask him about everything, about Dionysus, about love, and decided that Sisyphus would definitely tell her everything, because he always had something to say. The protagonist was walking through Tartarus and did not hear any sounds. In this place, Tantalus should have appeared by now, but she saw nothing but darkness. The little goddess remembered that she had been asked not to go deep into that place for anything, for such a little goddess could be torn apart there with one hand. Pauline realized that she had wandered too far, and if she had accidentally gone to the wrong place, she should just go back. She wasn't looking for new thrills at all, but was trying to calm herself down. In the distance, she saw a light. Turning her head, the protagonist saw hundreds of eyes that said it was a young goddess, smelling of death, emitting the scent of death. The voices said they hadn't seen the little young goddess in a long time, and they would have fun with her. Pauline saw the frightening stare of hundreds of eyes and smelled the strong odor of death. The protagonist was terrified and tears rolled from her eyes. Once, long ago, Zeus's grandfather Uranus saw the Hecatokyries that Gaia gave birth to and was horrified and threw them to the bottom of Tartarus. Zeus once pulled them out into the middle world, but, terrified of the consequences, hid them again in Tartarus. The hands of these creatures were already reaching for the girl. She promised that she would never do dangerous things without permission. Pauline cried and said that she would never cross the gates of Tartarus again and stop teasing. The main character begged to be saved just once and suddenly heard a voice saying that it would hope the girl would keep her promise. It was Thanatos telling Pauline that she was forever not listening to what she was being told. The voices shouted silently that it was the god of death who had come. Thanatos was telling Pauline that they would talk later. The heroine returned from Tartarus and was told off, and reminded that hundreds of times she had been told not to go there. Not to her. Anything could happen to her. Thanatos told Pauline that she could have died if he hadn't decided to check to see if she really did go there. He told her that everyone around them was very worried. Paulina begged for forgiveness. The girl was told that from now on she was forbidden to enter Tartarus, and it was forbidden to go anywhere without permission, and Baedekur was also forbidden. Thanatos told the Hecatokyries of Tartarus that Hades' daughter had come to them, and they could anger him and be stuck in Tartarus for life, so they should shut up. They didn't believe and thought it was a lie that Hades' daughter was there. Thanatos told the protagonist that even though it ended well, she was wrong if she thought it would be like that in the future, and asked her to try to be more responsible. The little goddess said she understood everything. Thanatos said that everyone was very scared, and Alexandra clung to his clothes so hard that she tore them and even ripped out feathers. Now the protagonist knew not to do rash things. The protagonist decided that she needed to stop going to Tartarus for a while. This was the first time Pauline had seen Thanatos so angry. He wanted the girl to finally realize that everyone cared about her. The protagonist decided that she would be obedient at first, and the next time she went, she would pull herself together. Thanatos said that an oath would have to be taken now. The oath had to be taken at the river Styx. Paulina was very indignant, and the man asked if she thought it would be enough to just cry, and that was it. Thanatos reminded her that the oath taken at that river must not be broken, not even by God. Whoever breaks the oath will fall asleep for 1 platonic year. That's 9 normal years, and then for 1 more platonic year will be out of Olympus. Standing on the bank of the river Styx, Pauline had to make an oath that she would not enter Tartarus again. The protagonist asked how she would fulfill her divine duty if she did so and could not enter Tartarus at all. Thanatos said that when she grows up, it won't matter to her. Pauline asked what would happen if something happened in the underworld that would give her no choice but to enter Tartarus. Thanatos replied that, in that case, she could certainly enter there, but it was unlikely to happen. The protagonist swore and called her name before the river Styx. Alice, Edward, and Alexandra gathered around the protagonist. They noticed that Pauline's face was very thin and possibly swollen, and she was about to meet the inhabitants of Olympus. They hadn't had any rest since the protagonist's birthday. Alice told about the rumors that Pauline met the worshippers of Dionysus, and he blundered. Oleg, the god of dreams, showed up. He talked about how the holidays of Dionysus are known for their madness, and his followers either go mad en masse or become pigs in a slaughterhouse. Oleg asked where to put this madness. They discussed that the followers of the dream god, once again, were having horrible fun in their dreams. Alice told Alexandra about him living a long time and never becoming normal. Inferior gods die of insanity, and while Oleg was beyond that, it was a boring life that made you want to die, and the only entertainment in it was listening to the screams of people waking up from a nightmare. But now Oleg was bored with that too. Even among the highest gods, those who really know how to have fun can be counted on the fingers of one hand. Seed-spreading Zeus, destroying animals. Artemis and Oleg, who are worse than military fanatics inciting people to battle. The immortality of the body does not help keep God sane, and it is true that half the dead die because of the gods, but he continues to live because he cannot die. It's a life of surrender, but you can't end it. Oleg was pondering this while lying in bed. Suddenly, Alexandra called him and told him to come over as soon as possible. The one he met at the end of it all was a real cutie little Paulina. Hades had entrusted his daughter to them. She was walking well by then, an awking child overnight. And so, in care, several years passed in an instant. Relative to how much Oleg had feared, he was glad. It was a disturbing happiness. Oleg said that when Pauline grew up, the immortal body would also swallow her fragile soul, and there would be a future left for her, as uninteresting as the white ceiling. Oleg sat near the girl's crib and thought about how events would develop if Pauline did not grow up. Arab came up behind him and said that children grow up, and he could not go against the entrance of time. The protagonist lying in bed was pulled by the cheek and told that this little prankster could not live without knowing the world outside the underworld. Oleg understood that perfectly well, but wanted her to stay with them longer. In Tartarus, the overprotection of the gods only intensified. Alexandra said she would spend all day looking after the girl. Alice suggested putting a listening device on the little goddess. Hermes could recommend a good one. Also, one option was to put a magic crystal on Pauline, but it was harder to communicate through it. The gods argued perhaps they should only allow the protagonist to go outside once a month. The protagonist ran away and thought everyone around her had gone completely insane. Pauline hid in the reeds on the river Styx. It seemed to her that she was already living a monotonous life and needed to be a little more patient with Tartarus. The protagonist was watched by the reed fairies, who noticed that the girl came again to their field. In the distance, Pauline saw a very handsome blonde-haired boy. The protagonist tried to figure out who it was. She assumed it was a daffodil, but then realized that he must have lilac hair, and it wasn't him. Pauline turned to the guy and said he was very handsome. The blonde-haired stranger got embarrassed. His face turned pink. He even embarrassed himself beautifully. The protagonist used to think that Anna was reckless in her love for a handsome man, but when it comes to someone so handsome, it became clear. The stranger said it was praise for him and called Pauline a goddess. The protagonist said she hadn't seen dead people like him here before and asked how he knew she was a goddess, a name that always came up in conversations about Anna. Golden, shiny hair, light eyes the color of the sea, and also coming from him the smell of a living person. It could only be one person. It was Adonis. Adonis was Anna's favorite concubine and a handsome man cherished by Aphrodite. Rumors spread that Aphrodite's favorite, Adonis, had become Anna's lover in the underworld. Aphrodite stood before the throne of Hades and begged to be allowed to be with Adonis. And even if he died, she could breathe life into him, and they could live together. She begged for a chance to see the one she loved, even if only for a little while. Anna pushed Aphrodite away and said he was already dead, begging her not to take away her only joy. Hades said that Adonis could be 6 months on Earth and 6 months in the underworld. The man who was able to master the hearts of the two goddesses at will was well known in the underworld. At night, he tempts Anna with his sweet speeches, and this is what the rumors surrounding this blonde-haired handsome man are. Adonis told the protagonist that he knows he can't show her a good side, and she's probably already heard the rumors about him, so he asked her to beat him up heartily. Pauline thought that the guy standing in front of her was far from those rumors. Pauline had not yet settled in her head the information that he, at will, charmed two goddesses. The girl assumed that he became famous because of his handsome appearance, and maybe it was her turn to hit on the handsome man. The protagonist told Adonis that she had nothing to beat him up for, and they were meeting for the first time at all. Pauline had previously envisioned him as a sleazy seducer, judging by the fact that he was described as someone who played with two goddesses. Pauline, of course, did not think that when they met immediately cursed him, but wanted to slap the guy, but apparently, rumors and really believe before you cannot. The the protagonist asked the guy where his mom had gone and why he was here alone. Adonis said that he wanted to see the underworld, and he had not much time left until the moment of his return. Paulina speculated that his mother must have gone crazy in that time. Pauline asked Adonis where he had time to visit the underworld. The guy told her that the first thing he did when he came out of Elysium was to go here. The protagonist couldn't believe that for so many years in the underworld, he had only seen Elysium and the river Styx. Of course, the protagonist knew that Anna wouldn't let him go, but she didn't think it was that serious. Pauline had told Adonis that there was a lot to see in the underworld. The guy laughed. The protagonist started running and said she couldn't believe that Adonis hadn't seen the Golden Palace or Cerberus and had never played at taking ribs out of skeletons. Pauline ran forward. She thought she could show everything here to this blonde-haired handsome man. Adonis ran after the little goddess and said she had a little talk with him. The protagonist stopped and looked at the guy, noticing that he had good manners and was much better than she thought. Adonis tried to say that he wanted something, but Pauline interrupted him, clarifying if this was the first outing for him. Back then, the protagonist didn't know anything yet. She said that she would show him all the places of the underworld, especially for him. Pauline could not have guessed how much her life would become confused because of these two goddesses. She showed Adonis the light of hope, the only passage connecting the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The protagonist told the fair-haired handsome man about Cape Tanneron in the Sparta region. The little goddess said that there were many more things to see and could not believe that Adonis had only seen the river Styx. Pauline said that if you just go up the River of Souls, you can see the golden palace of the goddess Styx, and after a little more traveling on Hadrian's boat, you can get to the Supreme Court and even see Cerberus there. The protagonist continued to tell the story, but she was interrupted by Adrian, whose boat they were traveling on. He asked who it was next to the little goddess, for after the incident with Orpheus, he does not carry the living. Adrian had been punished for giving in to Orpheus's music and giving him a ride on the boat. Pauline remembered this and said he must know Adonis. Adrian could not believe his eyes, and asked the little goddess to tell him rather that he had misheard something. The protagonist said that he had a close bond with her mom, but this guy was kinder than she thought. Pauline told Adrian that Adonis kept calling her a goddess, and it's true what they say. Rumors can't be trusted. Now Adrian saw that the goddesses cherished the handsome guy, and they cherished him for sharing a bed with them and making them happy. It was obvious that since Adonis was able to get into bed with two goddesses, he knew exactly how to treat the opposite sex. Pauline thought of him. Suddenly, Adrian's paddle broke. The man said it was already old. Adriano turned around and saw Paulina flirting with Adonis and telling him about the golden oars. The man realized that Anna was always the reason it wasn't easy. He asked the protagonist, did she really bring Adonis here without permission? For there was no way that Anna would allow it. The protagonist laughed and said that she was not a fool. Then Pauline was silent and thought that Adonis could not have gone for a walk alone after all. She wondered who was with him. The blonde-haired handsome man admitted that he had been alone, but had been waiting for the goddess Anna to get ready. The protagonist lowered her head and sadly realized the problem. She asked why the guy hadn't told her about it right away. Adonis replied that he was sure that Anna had given her daughter permission. The main heroine held her hands on her head and said that her mom could not allow her. After all, they have a very bad relationship and everyone knows it. Paulina shrieked with horror that the excursion was failed, and Anna would not leave this case without attention. Adonis asked Paulina not to worry so much, and said that Mrs. Anna was now regretting rather than hating her daughter, so she did not come close. The blonde-haired handsome man was sure that if you talked to the goddess, she would definitely understand everything. The guy noticed that the protagonist felt unwell and grabbed the boat. The protagonist laughed loudly and, wiping tears from her eyes, said that her mother wasn't coming closer because she was sorry. The girl remembered how Anna had treated her as a child and asked, does Adonis really believe that? Every night, before going to bed, Anna shed tears. It wasn't what she wanted. None of it was right. On Pauline's birthday, she wanted to throw her into the river, and this desire to kill her daughter. These words the protagonist will never be able to forget. The little goddess confessed to the blonde-haired handsome man that she really liked him. He was smart, listened to her enthusiastically, and was handsome, so she wished he would not say inappropriate words anymore, and they would see each other more often. Adrian's boat docked at the shore and the fairies were already taking Adonis away. In the distance, the protagonist saw her mother Anna walking towards her. The goddess swung at her daughter and slapped her with all her might. Anna told her daughter that she really did look like her. The fairies were horrified, and so was the blonde-haired beauty. The goddess grabbed her daughter. The words that she couldn't approach because of regret were disproved. Anna said her daughter was the same way, and when she liked something, she wanted to get her hands on it. Adrian walked up behind Anna and took her by the shoulders. He asked Mistress to keep her reputation intact and said that there were a lot of people looking at her. Anna turned around and saw Adonis, a fairy, and others looking at her. She let go of her daughter and ran to Adonis, hoping he wasn't hurt. Pauline walked over to Adrian saying that everything was fine and to leave, and the man was telling the little goddess that she had a serious condition. The protagonist replied that everything was fine and he needed to get back to work. Pauline knew that Adonis would be speechless after what he saw. He couldn't take his eyes off Paulina, but Anna yanked him away and told him they had to go. Those who had been watching what had happened just picked up and left. The main character didn't even think her mother would slap her, and realized that the goddess obsession was very frightening. The little goddess's cheek was burning after the slap. The protagonist heard two fairies gossiping about her and mocking the little goddess. Pauline laughed, and with her power lifted the fairy high above the ground. The fairy screamed in fear, and Pauline threw her as hard as she could against the ground. She reminded her that it would not do to have a princess show up next to the queen of the underworld. Adonis and the other fairies watched in horror at what was happening. The fairy tried to ask Pauline for forgiveness, but the latter said that she was no mockery to the fairies. The protagonist told the culprit that there was no way that she could not know that even next to Anna she could not escape punishment for offending the goddess. Pauline realized that she was cruel. The fairy begged to forgive her, and the protagonist stepped on her hand and ordered her not to be so arrogant from now on, enlisting the patronage of her mother. The protagonist said that similar mocking the goddess fairies will catch up with the same Kara, because there are still plenty of them. Anna and her lover and the others walked back in silence. Thanatos looked at Pauline and her burning cheek and asked if Anna had done it. The protagonist said who else would have been able to punch her in the face. Thanatos offered to go put something on the blow, but the girl refused. Pauline said she didn't want to show herself in front of everyone like that, and told Thanatos that he was trying to take care. The man told the little goddess to go straight back to the palace as soon as the marks from the blow had passed. The protagonist decided to hit Anna back. In the reception room of the royal palace, the protagonist lay in the arms of two men and asked if they knew who was born, just because they wanted to. There is a chair of oblivion that makes you forget everything. Of the men, there was the earthly king Purifoy, who confessed his love to Anna. Pauline also asked who couldn't hit because he had no hands, and explained that she held back because she didn't want to upset her father. The second was Theseus, the hero and friend of Pyrrhothoy. Pauline said she hadn't even kissed Adonis or even touched him, and those men were like punching bags for the protagonist. Alexandra looked at the little goddess and did not realize whether she knew or not what the girl had in her heart. Time flew very fast, and Pauline had grown up a lot. Alexandra asked if the protagonist remembered the rules of etiquette for the one who had arrived and the lineage of the gods they had studied. She asked the little goddess not to forget what they had taught her and to always be there for Hermes, not to give herself away. Alexandra asked the protagonist if she had memorized everything they had told her. The day of Pauline's ascent to Olympus came. It seemed to the little goddess that everyone was treating her as if she was going off to war. Alice, Alexandra, and a few others told the protagonist to be sure to stop by after the ceremony, because they would be waiting. They also suggested to the girl that she could run away if things got tough. Pauline told the people seeing her off that they loved her so much, and of course she would stop by to visit them. It was unusual for the protagonist to say such a thing, and she didn't understand why Alexandra was so nervous. Paulina thought that she was overprotective, and in addition she was annoyed by the dress because it was too motley. Alexandra personally chose the dress. At the carriage, the protagonist was met by Thanatos and asked why she was so late. Thanatos thought that Pauline would come out earlier and asked what was wrong. The protagonist smiled and said that Alexandra had done her best. The girl's daddy was supposed to show up. The little goddess asked why everyone around them was making so much noise. The protagonist assumed that it was because everyone wanted to see her, but if that was the case, It was unclear why she wasn't welcomed here. Thanatos asked the girl not to build up empty hopes. From the carriage window, Pauline saw her mother Anna and asked why she was here, since one meeting was enough for her. The girl did not understand why they see each other so often, and why is here the one who never blessed her. The protagonist turned to Thanatos and said she wasn't hallucinating, but she couldn't come here alone. Pauline noticed Thanatos' face tense up, and that Anna had come here because she knew her daughter would pay attention. Pauline laughed and said that Anna had hated Hades for so many hundreds of years, and why would she pay attention to her? Thanatos suddenly covered Pauline's eyes with his hands, but through his fingers she saw Anna and Adonis kiss. The protagonist marveled that they were still using their tongues and said it was such a way of rejuvenation, kissing a young handsome man. Thanatos asked Pauline not to look there. The little goddess said that this is exactly what Adonis does to entice the goddesses, and now she too wants a kiss with the handsome man. The protagonist heard the sounds of horses and realized that someone else was coming this way. Alexandra's lessons had indeed benefited her. The developing blonde hair and reliefs of white swans belonged to only one goddess, Aphrodite. Aphrodite hugged Adonis tightly, and Pauline realized that everyone was here to see her, not the little goddess. The protagonist realized that she was very wrong. Aphrodite was telling Adonis how much she had missed her these 6 months. Anna became enraged. Thanatos told Paulina that she'd better not see this, and what was happening now in the place where Anna had just been couldn't be shown to the children. Paulina said that there were no children here either, and she had known human thoughts since birth. Thanatos told the girl that it was bad for her, but she replied that her eyes loved watching it, and he wouldn't be able to distract with words. Thanatos stubbornly tried to cover the protagonist's eyes with his hand, and she bit his finger and said that goddesses don't lose. The man replied that she wasn't a goddess, but an animal if she liked that kind of thing gratuitously. Thanatos' finger bled, and he took his hand away from Pauline, who saw that the loving couple was about to leave and decided that she should say hello. She approached Aphrodite with Adonis and introduced herself. Aphrodite realized that this was the daughter of Hades, and realized that the little goddess had seen everything that was going on. The goddess became incredibly ashamed and tried to explain it by saying that she had been separated from Adonis for a long time. The main character marveled at how this goddess, even while embarrassed, was full of love. Aphrodite told Pauline that she had seen her as a little girl when she was just born. The little goddess realized that beauty was indeed the best thing. Aphrodite approached the protagonist and quietly told her that she knew that today was the day of her ascension to Olympus and wished her to become a great follower of Hades. Pauline thanked her in return and decided that she would not wash her face today, for she had been kissed by the most beautiful goddess and must be sure to show off to Hermes. It was clear from Adonis's face that he had something to say. Aphrodite complimented Pauline's dress. The protagonist saw with what expression Adonis stands. It was as if he knew that with such an expression on his face, he could forgive everything. Hades appeared and told Aphrodite that he was glad to meet her, and asked why she had not been seen lately. Pauline ran up to her father and hugged him. Hades told Aphrodite that he knew how she didn't like to go out in public, but still asked her to stop by Olympus once in a while so they wouldn't forget what Aphrodite looked like. Hades smiled sweetly at the goddess of beauty. She said goodbye and got into the carriage with Adonis. Her father took Pauline in his arms. They were to be seen at the palace soon. As the carriage pulled away, Hades told his daughter that he couldn't wait for her to leave, for Aphrodite loved to talk so much. Pauline laughed and said that the goddess was very beautiful. Thanatos said from behind that it was time for them to hit the road and asked the protagonist not to cause an accident on the way. The protagonist got angry and told Thanatos that she doesn't cause accidents. He, in response, wished Mr. Hades a good journey. Pauline's father said they would drive with extreme caution. What caution is there? The outside world is full of bright colors. The same sky has hundreds of colors, beautiful so that no words can describe this beauty. Father asked the protagonist how she felt about the world Hermes told her about. Pauline, with her eyes wide open, replied that it was all more beautiful than she had imagined. She found it difficult to sit still in her seat. When Anna kissed Adonis, Pauline thought that it was good that Daddy wasn't around, but the protagonist guessed that Daddy was late on purpose. He knows everything about Mommy, and knows that today is the day of her farewell to Adonis. He couldn't help but know it. From the moment the protagonist heard Anna's request not to look for her, there was always one question in the little goddess's heart that she kept secret. If Pauline didn't look like her daddy, if she wasn't her mother's daughter, he would still love her. Even if Pauline looked like Anna, it wouldn't make her love her, and even if she was similar in appearance. The fact that the protagonist is the child of Hades, who she disliked, was crucial. The protagonist realized that nothing would have changed. She assumed that if she looked like Anna, her dad would probably love her even more. The little goddess wanted to ask, but she was scared. Pauline was troubled. Her father noticed this. He put his arm around his daughter and said it was time to take a walk. The protagonist took Hades' hand and smiled. Everything was fine now. The red-haired boy sat on the mountain of dead men and talked about how it seemed that this day had finally come, and now he could kill the impudent man. The protagonist expected the ceremony to be a formal celebration. Contrary to the little goddess's expectations, Olympus seemed free. The flowers were colorful and beautiful like gems. Pauline thought there was nothing more beautiful than the jewels of the underworld. The girl sat in the arms of the main god. Zeus told the main character that when he first saw her, she had fit in his one hand, but now she had grown. He said that the little goddess was very cute, and once Eros was as small as she was, but now he had gotten nasty. The main character was asked if the underworld makes her homesick. Pauline replied that it was a nice place too. Zeus asked what the little goddess thought of being on Olympus for the first time. Hermes sat next to her on his throne and winked at the girl. Pauline replied that it was beautiful here. Zeus was pleased that she liked everything and asked if the girl knew what her task was as a goddess of resurrection. The protagonist took it all as a test and answered that of course she knows that she needs to bring back to the surface those who by chance were in the netherworld. Pauline said that in spring she needed to breathe life into that which had lost its strength in winter, to tie the threads of fate to those who had atoned for their sin in the underworld and allow them to be reborn. Zeus replied that all was correct, and she was indeed the daughter of Hades. He told her that in fact, there was one more important thing for her to do. He whispered in the girl's ear that she has the power to raise the dead, and that is something that no god of Olympus, not even the highest god like him, can do. All living things have threads of fate tied to them by the three goddesses of fate. The most indestructible of these is the thread of life. It is especially important to humans. The protagonist asked Zeus for an apology for disrupting his story and told him that if it bothers him, she has no plans to interfere with the life and death of humans. To be honest, she didn't place much importance on death at all. The girl said that only your place of residence changes from the outside world to the underworld. Zeus said there was a reason why Pauline did not go outside the underworld and told her to do what she thought was right. Zeus's words reassured Pauline, and at the same time, she realized that the other gods don't see it that way. Their opinions are different. Zeus said that to take Aphrodite as an example, after Adonis died, she shared him with another, and now, every time they meet, she will beg to resurrect Adonis. Pauline laughed and said that she would, and that Adonis smelled like a dead man. Zeus replied that it does. The life force has its limit. Adonis has been dead for a long time, and everyone who knew him is dead too. Even if he was resurrected, it would not disturb the course of life. Besides, Aphrodite would always be by his side. It was obvious that in such a case, Anna would go mad. Zeus said that actually, he still had many more requests, but since he was the main god here, he was not allowed to voice them all. Zeus reminded the main character that those who disrupt the course of life go to Tartarus. Pauline immediately remembered this mountain of skeletons that humped at her and called her a little goddess who smells of death. The protagonist replied that she knew it better than anyone. Zeus said that she could use the regular gods and said that it was time to start the initiation ceremony for the new goddess. He wished the little girl to always make wise choices. In the name of the supreme god Zeus, he christened Pauline, daughter of Hades, the princess of the underworld, and named her the goddess of resurrection. Now Pauline sees that everyone has lust and passion in their gaze. What good will it do for them? What loss? Aphrodite asked the protagonist to come to her as soon as it was over. The little goddess realized that this was probably what Zeus wanted her to know. The magnificent and beautiful Olympus. Everyone was honoring the new goddess. Pauline felt the strength within her and decided she could handle anything. There was calmness and a smile on her face. Hermes asked the protagonist if Olympus was better than she thought. Pauline replied that it was worth seeing. Hermes noticed the way the little goddess looked at the flowers. The protagonist thought that these flowers were more elegant than the ones in the underworld. Hermes patted the little goddess's hair and said she was ever so stubborn. Pauline said that the celebration itself was very different from what she had envisioned. The little goddess asked if things were too loose around here. Hermes replied that everyone behaved more openly here than in the underworld, and Thanatos had the same reaction. The protagonist was surprised that Thanatos was partying here too. Pauline thought he was a eunuch. Hermes replied that he reluctantly had a couple drinks and left, as did Hades. Definitely the gods of the underworld are more prudish than the other male gods, which is why there are rumors that everyone in the underworld is boring. Pauline said she never once saw Thanatos even lay a hand on a woman. Hermes said that Thanatos must be having a hard time and doesn't know what real pleasure is. After his words, he abruptly pulled the girl who was serving drinks towards him. She begged Hermes to let her go and said she didn't want to do that. Hermes clung tighter to the girl and asked her to say that she didn't like it. At that moment, Pauline kicked Hermes with all her might and said that if he didn't understand the words, he should be slapped, because the girl clearly said that she didn't want to and there was nothing to meddle with. The protagonist said that you can't behave like that even if you are a god. To the girl, she promised that she would scold him again separately. Hermes did not understand what this reaction was and laughed loudly. Pauline didn't understand why he found it so funny. The little goddess was left alone and sat in the empty hall on the floor, reflecting on the fact that Thanatos deserved to be only in the underworld. The protagonist remembered that she was supposed to meet Aphrodite. Pauline really did not want to see her, but she realized that goddesses do not run away, so she resolutely got up and headed to Aphrodite. Knocking on the door, Pauline realized that no one was there, but the door, for some reason, was open. Once upon a time, the protagonist had heard something from the fairies. On the day that Adonis was to return to Olympus, Anna, out of fear, chained him. The protagonist thought that Adonis must be chained now. The little goddess decided that she would just take one look with one eye and, if anything, help him. Pauline did not understand why this guy was even born so handsome. The protagonist entered Aphrodite's chambers and tried to understand where Adonis had disappeared to. Walking a little further and looking behind the curtain, she saw that Aphrodite and her lover are having a great time in bed. Pauline realized that her opinion was wrong, and certainly Aphrodite was not angry with Adonis, and he, on the contrary, was now diligently receiving praise. Pauline realized that she had helped him again and decided that she should not be like the actions of others, neither the fairies nor Adonis, because it would only be to her detriment. Pauline decided to go drink the drink of the mysteries of the gods. There was a figure lurking behind a column, watching the little goddess. The voice asked if she was the goddess of resurrection and said she was even smaller than expected. The protagonist saw red hair and a savage posture. The guy asked why the girl was silent, for he hadn't heard that she was deaf. Pauline knew that only one person could exude such a strong odor of blood. It was the god of war, Ares. The protagonist bowed and said she was glad to meet him. He was Aphrodite's first love. There was a lot of information about this goddess of beauty. For the reason that Aphrodite was disgusted with the appearance of her husband Hephaestus, she shared her love with many. But her most famous lover was her husband's younger brother, Ares, the primary god, patron of war, who along with Athena helped replenish the population of the underworld. Pauline kept wondering when they would meet, but she didn't know it would happen like this. There was only one reason he could be looking for the main character. Ares said he would be brief and explained that Aphrodite would be asking Pauline to resurrect Adonis, and she dreams of her beloved being resurrected. It was he who turned wild boar and killed Adonis. Ares told the protagonist that there was only one thing she needed to do. If Aphrodite asked her to do it, she should just say no. Pauline realized that there was no way that this was the only reason he was looking for the girl. Ares said that if Aphrodite were to breathe life into her lover, it would have a limit, and the dead man would not be able to resist fate forever and continue to tossing between Olympus and the underworld. The protagonist realized that the god of war was the one responsible for everything. Ares said that if Adonis was stuck in the underworld, it would make things easier for both of them. Talked about how Pauline would be happy to have Anna hanging around him and not going outside. The god of war added that the protagonist didn't want to do anything unreasonable at all and get punished. Ares told the little goddess that the punishment for disobeying the statutes would not bypass even God. He asked the protagonist if she had heard him. The girl wasn't scared at all. The jealousy of the gods is very fierce. The little goddess realized that the god of war himself had ingratiated himself with another man's wife and now dares to ask her to do such a thing. Pauline heard that day. It was a disgrace, and Aphrodite's husband was telling his brother that even here he was not ashamed and it was ridiculous. Even being disgraced in front of all the gods, looking at Ares who keeps running after her, Aphrodite's preference seems pretty broad. Perhaps it wasn't just his looks. Ares leaned over to Pauline and told her that this creep had to be killed and he would be waiting. The protagonist thought he was rabid, and she even got goosebumps. Because of the fact that he is increasing the population of the underworld, his doubts have grown to a point. Aphrodite apparently really only sees his face. In fact, Pauline didn't originally plan to resurrect Adonis, but because of Adonis, she didn't want to go to Tartarus, even though he was beautiful. The protagonist didn't know what to do. Her insides were twisted. The little goddess remembered that Zeus had told her not to do that either. It was too hard, so Pauline decided to go back and drink the nectar. Pauline stood in front of a huge door that hid one truth the little goddess had missed. This is the reason why Zeus gave the instruction of resurrection on the day of the banquet. The protagonist opened the door, behind which stood a huge number of people who asked Mrs. Pauline to resurrect someone. Everyone knows the danger of disturbing the course of life. The little goddess was begged for resurrection. There were a great number of people wanting to bring someone back to life. Pauline closed the door, though people asked her not to close it, for they already knew she was there. Hermes was lying in the arms of the red-haired girl and eating little apples of paradise. Pauline was nowhere to be seen, and the girl reminded him that it was he who had been entrusted to look after the little goddess. Hermes was sure that the girl was all right, but it was not so at all. The main character was crying and talking about what kind of paradise on earth we are talking about. If she knew that everyone would stick to her like that, she would not have come to Olympus. The girl did not want to resurrect anyone. Hermes came up to Pauline and asked her why she looked like that and if she was enjoying the celebration. He said that apparently the rumors that she was being chased everywhere by those who wanted to resurrect someone were indeed true. It's been 3 days now and corpses are being dumped on the beautiful Olympus. Bodies are being brought in, flies are flying around and even threatening her. The protagonist told Hermes that she was in no mood to talk and told him to leave. He replied that Hades, if rumors were to be believed, had gone somewhere to be alone. Pauline suggested that maybe it was either because of the giants or something else. Hermes suggested that maybe it was about the Titans. Pauline turned her head and stared intently, waiting for any information. Hermes asked not to look at him with that intimidating look. 2 predictions were brought down to earth. The first was that the Titans would invade Olympus, and the second that Daddy's son would be rid of them. It was about Zeus's son, the demigod Hercules. Hermes said it had been 10 years since that prediction and suggested that maybe it would come true. Then she noticed that the main character was holding a wine glass and asked when she had time to drink so much. Pauline was indignant and asked what kind of love it was that everyone brought rotting bodies to her and asked her to resurrect them. The little goddess said that if they love them so much and miss them, then let them come to them in the afterlife or pray to Zeus. Hermes felt ashamed and covered his face with his hands and watched the protagonist lap wine from a glass. This wine was brought to her by one of those who had asked for the resurrection of a loved one. Hermes turned to this man and asked if he thought that if he gave the goddess a drink, she would agree to the resurrection. He took the glass from Pauline and said that Erebus had ordered her to be watched. The little goddess asked to give the glass back and said that it wasn't about surveillance, but was just asked to keep an eye on her. Hermes told the protagonist that she was already drunk, and it was time to go to bed. Pauline replied that goddesses don't get drunk. The little goddess asked Hermes if he had ever seen the goddess of resurrection ever be drunk. Hermes said that right now he sees a drunken goddess of resurrection in front of him. Pauline talked about being a goddess and asked if he even knew how great her powers were. The little goddess showed Hermes the middle finger. The main character continued to talk about how great her powers were, saying that she didn't get drunk because she was a goddess. Hermes thought that when this little girl wakes up, how embarrassed she will be. Pauline waved her hands and asked to destroy Olympus because everything is unbearable here, and Hermes is a liar. He apologized and said he screwed up, and Pauline fell to the floor. The protagonist lay with a glass of wine on her face and asked Hermes if he had ever fallen in love with a human woman. The answer was positive, and Pauline decided to ask about where the woman was now. Hermes asked the little goddess to wipe the wine off her face because it looked like blood and promised to tell her everything after she wiped it off. He admitted that he had never told anyone about it, and it had been several hundred years since she had died. Pauline asked if he wanted her to resurrect his beloved as well. The little goddess said she would spare nothing for Hermes. He answered that there was no need to do so, for it was impossible to resurrect the dust into which her bones had already been wiped. The protagonist realized that if shit was worth talking about, apparently they had been through a lot. Pauline asked why he was giving up so easily if he loved the man. She said that her father still wants to possess her mom even though she ran away from him. The protagonist told Hermes that if he refuses so easily, then he doesn't love her at all. He responded by tapping Pauline on the head and saying that he loved her very much. The little goddess said that there was no need to beat, and it was better to tell about what she was. Hermes replied that he couldn't remember, and I think she had long hair and was very beautiful. The protagonist noticed that his face even glowed. Hermes said that this girl was very fond of flowers, and he treasured her like his breath. So he missed her a lot at first. Hermes said that then 10 years passed, and then hundreds of years, and then several hundred more years, and he really had forgotten everything. Her face and name and smile and voice and everything. Pauline looked carefully at her interlocutor, and for the first time she saw such a smile on his face. Hermes told Paulina that if she felt that she was falling in love with a man, it was better not to even start. Pauline replied that not starting something because of fear is the lot of cowards. Hermes replied that he was afraid of a lot of things. Pauline said that no matter how hard she tried, she would still fall in love with a man, and asked what she should do in such a case. There are only two ways out: run for your life or kill him before you lose your head to love. If you don't do that, you will end up suffering in the end. They decided to leave this conversation for later. Since ancient times, gods in love with humans couldn't be happy. The moon goddess Selene fell in love with the handsome shepherd Edmund, and to save him from aging, she put him into eternal sleep. Eos, goddess of the dawn, fell in love with the Trojan prince Typhon and asked to give him immortality. As a result, Siren could only whisper her love to the sleeping Edmund forever while he slept. And Eos, looking at the immortal but aging Typhon, turned him into a cicada and kept him near her all her life. Pauline replied that she was not Selene and asked him about love, not about goddesses. Hermes answered the protagonist that perhaps she would soon have a prime example like Anna and Adonis. He was saying that in any case, there were already enough gods who suffer from love for man. Hermes was saying that the moral strength of the gods was not replenished, and they could only wait to forget. They could only wait for hundreds of years to pass. Hermes explained to Pauline that this was why, if she fell in love with a man, something would happen. The protagonist did not finish listening. Her eyes closed and she lost consciousness. In the morning, Zeus woke up in his bed with the girl. She was telling Mr. Zeus how beautiful he was today. The god replied that it was their last night, even though they are the perfect couple. Under the blanket, the loving couple felt someone moving next to them. Zeus assumed he could have brought two people with him last night, but he didn't remember anyone. Lifting the blanket, Zeus saw Pauline wishing them good morning. The man was completely naked, and when he realized that the protagonist was looking right between his legs, pushed the girl off the bed. The protagonist was talking about how maybe Zeus perhaps wanted to try something new. Pauline said that she must have had a lot to drink last night and somehow got in here. Zeus replied that, in that case, he asked not to get drunk again to such a state. The protagonist told the lovers to continue their morning exercise. Zeus said that half of the celebration had already arrived and asked the girl what she was up to, because she had lived in the underworld since birth and, probably, it was difficult for her to understand the structure of the world on the surface. That's why Zeus wanted Pauline to stay here longer. He asked the protagonist to think about it until the day of departure. The little goddess said goodbye and wished her a good time. The protagonist thought it would end there, but suddenly it turned out that someone had started rumors about Pauline being together with Zeus. Hermes laughed. The little goddess asked him to explain what was the matter. The girl assumed that he was the one who had started the rumor. Someone came up behind the little goddess and said that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. On the surface, besides Hermes, Pauline had another friend, the one who made the golden chairs, the god of blacksmithing. When the protagonist saw her friend, she ran to hug him. It was Hephaestus. He also said that he saw the initiation ceremony and asked if the girl was having a good time here. Pauline said that she was certainly doing fine and asked Hephaestus how he was doing. The protagonist decided that it was not worth saying anything about Aphrodite. The god of blacksmithing replied that he was fine and heard that Pauline had made a fuss in her father's room. The little goddess said that someone had started a rumor. Hermes, who was standing nearby, said that Pauline went in there and opened the doors herself, got in there right in the middle of the action, and he couldn't intervene. Hephaestus said he had done something recently and asked the girl if she wanted to watch. Pauline saw that her friend had made golden girls. They were statues of pure gold. The god of blacksmithing said that he had a hard time moving lately, and he made them to help him. Hephaestus said that when he needed to fan his furs, or when he needed to take hold of something hot, they were very helpful. The god of blacksmithing was surprised that the protagonist still hadn't answered him anything, and turning around, he saw Pauline hugging one of the golden girls and asking him to give one to her. Hephaestus replied to the little goddess that he was afraid. Pauline begged her friend to give her one golden girl. A dark figure was watching everything that was happening from the bushes. Hephaestus said he was sorry, but he only had 2 golden girls and he needed them both, so he couldn't give one. Pauline realized that nothing could be done, and with a sad face began to leave. Hephaestus noticed that the little goddess really liked the golden girls and said that he had one unsuccessful attempt before he made 2 of them, and he could bring her here. The blacksmith god said that even though he called the first golden girl a failed attempt, the problem was only due to her character and absolutely nothing serious. Pauline happily agreed and hugged her friend gratefully. Hephaestus told the little goddess that she is the only one who always hugs him. Hermes spread his arms out to the sides, letting her know with his look that he too could hug the god of blacksmithing. Hephaestus smiled and said he would not hug Hermes. The incident with Pauline in Zeus's bedroom brought an unforeseen result. Zeus from his throne broadcast that from this moment, excessive requests, in particular excessive use of alcohol by the young goddess, as well as behavior that crossed the boundaries, were forbidden and serious measures should be taken. Hermes spoke to Pauline about how nice it was that no one else was getting sticky. The protagonist was talking about how she was fed up with the whole Olympus thing. Hermes thought that the little goddess just hadn't felt its charm and hadn't been to the local market yet. The protagonist didn't think she would be interested. Hermes took Pauline by the hair and they tried to figure out what the atmosphere around them was. It felt like someone was having a fight. The little goddess concluded, judging from those cheers, it wasn't some kind of fight. Perhaps something fun is happening on this dull Olympus after all. And as Pauline walked through the crowd, she saw purple hair. It was Dionysus. He said hello to Pauline and apologized for being late for such an important event, and wished the little goddess grace on her journey. The girl thanked him in return. Hermes was nearby and noticed Pauline tense up as she spoke to Dionysus. The protagonist knew that it was in Dionysus's power to create an atmosphere suitable for fun and entertainment. The little goddess told Hermes that she simply became uncomfortable. If the gods were not pleased, they could level a city or destroy an entire country. Since the gods created humans, they could also destroy. Were the gods really free? In the end, Pauline quickly left. She said that no one else cared and Hermes had gone somewhere. The main heroine turned her head and saw Adonis beside her. The little goddess asked the blonde-haired handsome man why he had come here. Adonis replied that he had come to talk to her for a while. Pauline thought that he must have come to deliver Aphrodite's words. The protagonist noticed that Aphrodite's symbols were swans, also here, and assumed that she might be following them, and even if she wasn't, It was unclear why he was taking her to such a remote place. Pauline asked Adonis to tell her directly what Aphrodite had asked. The blonde-haired handsome man admitted that even Aphrodite would not be able to hear what he would tell her here. Adonis confessed to the little goddess that Aphrodite wanted Pauline to resurrect him. Aphrodite wanted Adonis to be resurrected and be with her. He asked the protagonist to deny this request to the goddess. The blonde-haired handsome man begged the protagonist to refuse Aphrodite. Pauline asked Adonis, "Does he understand what he said now, because it is certain death?" The guy answered that he knows all this himself. Pauline asked Adonis if he wanted to be stuck in the underworld forever and never see Aphrodite again. The guy was silent in response, and the protagonist suggested that it was Ares who might have intimidated him. Adonis didn't deny that he was intimidated, but explained that it wasn't the main reason. Paulina suggested that the guy might just not like Aphrodite. Adonis said it was impossible not to love her, and it was true. The little goddess speculated that it might not be about Aphrodite at all, but that he loved her mother more. The boy replied that he loved Anna too, of course, but that wasn't the point. Adonis turned to the little goddess and said that she liked his looks. The girl confirmed and said that he was indeed handsome. It was clear by the look on his face that this was what he expected to hear. Adonis said that whether it was Aphrodite or Anna, they would never change, and that was the reason why. The blonde-haired handsome man looked at the fountain and said that unlike the almighty, ordinary people, as time passes, grow old and die. Adonis looked at his reflection in the water and said that the older he gets, his appearance, which everyone thinks is beautiful, will change when he gets old. The boy said he wasn't ready to feel that. In the temple on Olympus, Hermes was standing in the temple and contemplating the fact that Pauline was long gone. There were several people near him who were clearly not feeling well. Hermes looked at Aphrodite, who was standing off to the side, and noticed that she was somehow smiling mysteriously. He also noticed that the red-haired Ares looked uneasy as well. It was obvious that they were up to something. Aphrodite was approached by Adonis and announced that he had returned. Aphrodite asked him how everything went, and the guy replied that everything was fine, but Pauline was nowhere to be found. Hermes was trying to figure out where the little goddess had disappeared to. Hermes approached people and asked if they had seen a girl with curly purple hair. One of the passers-by answered in which direction the little goddess had gone. It became obvious that Pauline had gone far enough. Hermes could no longer sit quietly and wait. Hermes pondered that perhaps he should not have let the little goddess go, but instead should have held on tighter, for this fool was making all the gods around her worry. Erebus asked him to keep an eye on her. When a power struggle broke out on Olympus, Erebus gave up the throne and descended with the Titans into the underworld, becoming the second god after Zeus. Since they are close to Pauline, he is her mentor and has been very protective of her since she was a little girl. Obviously, if something suddenly happens to Pauline on Olympus, somewhere in the Titans, that since the feud has been harboring a grudge, may rise again. Hermes ran in search of the little goddess. Hermes was also worried about that expression on Pauline's face, the last one he saw. Suddenly, the guy ran to the fountain and saw the little goddess sitting there. Hermes tried to catch his breath and said if the girl knew how many beautiful fairies he had missed while he was waiting for her. The protagonist replied that it was a nightmare and asked Hermes why he was acting like this. The guy didn't understand how he could behave differently. Pauline said that none of that mattered and asked him not to say anything. Hermes asked the protagonist why she had such a strange expression on her face. The little goddess said that Adonis had asked him not to resurrect her. Hermes suggested that he had confessed that he loved Anna more. Pauline laughed and said that she had thought so too at the beginning. Hermes said that Adonis was just a fool with a cute face and asked what the little goddess said to him. The protagonist smiled and admitted that she agreed. Adonis told Pauline that Ares did intimidate him, but much more than that, he was afraid that while he would slowly grow old, next to Aphrodite, he would see Ares who remained just as young and beautiful. This is why Adonis asked the main character to let him stay dead. He asked if this would be a problem for the little goddess, and suddenly she thought that the look on Adonis's face was familiar to her. She remembered Hermes talking about his lover, whose face, name, smile, and voice he had forgotten. The expression on his face had been the same as Hermes's that day. Presently, he found Pauline at the fountain and said that though Adonis was handsome, he was thinking badly. for he really thought that the goddess had been with him so long only because she was in love with his looks. Hermes was saying that Adonis doesn't think that in all their eternal life they haven't met any handsome men besides him. The guy talked about how sad that was, and Pauline replied that she understood everything, and if you think about it a little, you can figure out how deep their love is. The little goddess realized that this short and skinny kid was going to trample Aphrodite's love with his desires. Pauline thought that if he looked up a little, he could realize it. Hermes laughed and said that Adonis was thinking very humanly, and everyone around him had already decided that Aphrodite had settled down. Hermes was surprised that Pauline, knowing all this, did not tell Adonis anything, for he thought that she and he were close. The little goddess said that she certainly liked this blonde-haired handsome man because he was handsome. However, some people are so handsome that even if they like them, they annoy them. The protagonist realized that if Adonis dies, he will never see Aphrodite again, and then he will definitely think that Aphrodite might have loved him even if he were very old. But the choice will be already made. All that will be left for this blonde-haired handsome man is to regret and question endlessly. Adonis would be left wondering if Anna continued to love him because he was young and handsome. Pauline realized that he would probably regret his decision forever, constantly questioning her mother's love. The little goddess laughed and said that all of this could go to his detriment. Hermes looked at Pauline and said she had a caterpillar in her hair. The protagonist screamed and asked Hermes not to laugh, but rather to get the caterpillar out of her hair. Pauline got annoyed because Hermes was laughing with her and said it was a serious conversation. The guy apologized and said that he had removed the caterpillar and the little goddess had done well. He also said it was Adonis's problem that he couldn't reason properly. Hermes asked the girl if she had done as he asked. Paulina admitted that she worried a lot that he would be angry and did as Hermes asked. The boy replied that he had no reason to be angry and would never understand why people made such willful decisions. Paulina apologized for thinking that Hermes was only interested in a way to lure girls. The boy replied that it was a little unpleasant to hear such a thing in person. Hermes realized that tomorrow was the last day of the celebration and asked Pauline what decision she had made, whether to stay on Olympus or return to the underworld. The protagonist thought for a moment and then said that she was very busy. Pauline admitted that initially she wanted to return to the underworld, but the more she listened to Adonis, the more anxious thoughts crept in. Hermes questioned the little goddess about what kind of thoughts visited her. The protagonist confessed that she was not sure that her father loved her, and perhaps she was just a substitute for her mother. The girl speculated that her father might love her only because of the fact that she looks like Anna. Pauline said that such thoughts visited her quite often. Hermes looked carefully at the little goddess and said that, as it turned out, she was worried about more serious things than he thought. The girl said that her daddy was her whole life. The protagonist propped her head up with her hand and said that she and her father hardly ever see each other anyway, because he was always busy. Hermes smiled and said there was only one answer: go over and ask in person. The last day of the ceremony came. Pauline smiled. She never got to ask the questions she was interested in personally. She still hadn't had time to do anything, and it was already decision day. The little goddess sat on the throne. Hermes was by her side. Hades, the father of the protagonist, approached. Pauline felt awkward and thought it was because of what she was thinking at the time. She wanted to ask her father how he was doing, but Zeus was already standing next to her and answered instead of Hades. Zeus told the little goddess that her daddy was doing great, but the most important question was whether she had made a decision. He was asking the girl if she could be counted on. Pauline felt Zeus's gaze weighing on her too much. The protagonist looked at Hermes and tried to understand his look and expression. Taking a full breath, Pauline spoke confidently. Olympus, it's not a bad place. There are blossoming flowers, shimmering colors, and a lot of things that you can't see in the underworld. But despite the beauty of the place, Pauline was born and raised there. The tumultuous days of the ceremony were over. The protagonist could not say that she regretted her visit to Olympus. Besides, her friend Hermes was there. Pauline and her father were returning home. For forgiveness, Pauline called Hermes to visit her next time. It was also hard for the little goddess to say goodbye to the kind fairies who wished her a good journey. The girl was given a bouquet of beautiful flowers. To the main heroine ran the god of war, who hugged her tightly and tearfully thanked her for not resurrecting Adonis. Red-haired Ares told Pauline that he was her debtor, and if the little goddess needed anything, she could safely turn to him. Aphrodite was watching everything that was going on from the side. The protagonist at the end of her stay on Olympus liked everything. Zeus appeared, who asked whether the little goddess really decided to return to the underworld. Hades took Ares by the hair and told Zeus that he thought their conversation was over. Daddy was pleased with Pauline's choice. He put his hand on his daughter's shoulder, and she took his fingers and smiled. The protagonist loved the glitter of gold and the endless supply of gems, but more than anything else, she loved something else. Hades gave his daughter anything she wanted. He quietly gave her gold and silver, and even gave her the fields of the asphodels. This is the part of the realm of the dead where neutral souls are found. Pauline realized how great it would be to stay on Olympus, but also realized that it wasn't going to happen. The little goddess believed that Olympus was not for her, and the underworld was where she belonged. The protagonist believed that at home she could live happily ever after. Suddenly, Pauline found herself in some strange place, and in front of her stood a man in a cloak who asked if she really loved gold and jewelry. The stranger said that the little goddess liked that Hades was the one giving her these jewels, but she couldn't be sure if it was all just for her. Pauline asked the man who he was and what this place was. The stranger called Pauline a small, pathetic goddess, and said that if Anna loves Hades, he won't love his daughter so much anymore. The protagonist said it made no difference. The man decided to take off his robe, and Pauline froze when she saw her mother standing in front of her. She spoke to the girl about how it was fake love. Anna grabbed her daughter by the throat and told her that there was something that the little goddess could never have at will because she had taken it from her. Suddenly, Pauline came to her senses and was trying to figure out what strange dream she had just had. Her father asked the protagonist what was happening to her. The little goddess answered that she was fine. Dad was showing Pauline his love materially. The protagonist thought that even if he didn't invest his soul, she was fine as it was. She was ready to be satisfied with just Hades' smile. The protagonist convinced herself that everything was fine, and there were a huge number of gods around who loved her. Hades turned to his daughter and said that if she wanted to ask something, now was the best time to do it. The father promised to be honest with Pauline. The protagonist felt awkward, but she focused and asked her father if he loved her. Hades opened his eyes wide and asked why she was asking. Obviously, he was not at all animated by such a question. Hades had always tried his best to make sure his daughter had everything. The father made an effort to still speak warm words to his daughter in spite of his character, and didn't know that the problem was far from that. He told Pauline that of course he loved her very much and was even ready to give the throne. The protagonist said that all this is not at all proof that he loves her, and all this can be done even without love. Hades looked at his daughter carefully. He thought that love was a thing that could be held in his hands. Pauline reminded her father that when she was in Zeus's bedroom, he didn't say anything to her, although everyone around gossiped about it. The protagonist thought it would be better if Hades scolded her. The little goddess looked at her father with her eyes wide open and asked if he really loved her. Everything that Hades thought was an expression of his love had become just cause for doubt. Paulina hoped her father didn't see her as a replacement for her mother. Hades remembered Anna saying she cursed him and asked him not to pretend he was sorry. The woman talked about how she'd been hurt because of his love and promised that he'd regret it. What Hades didn't know was that by plucking this flower, he would condemn it to death. It happened in just a second when he saw the goddess of spring laughing among the flowers. The man was as if mesmerized. Hades brought Anna to his underground kingdom and chained her. The woman said that this could not be love at all, because when one loves, one is not chained. Anna asked Hades not to deceive himself and to recognize that it was not love. Anna said that Hades just wanted to chain her to him and asked him to let her go to the surface now. It was his favorite flower. And the man had decided from the beginning that this woman belonged to him. Hades grabbed Anna and kissed her. During the kiss, he fed something to the girl, and she questioned in horror what it was. If you eat something from the underworld, you will be stuck in it forever. Hades fed Anna a pomegranate seed from the underworld. Anna tried to induce vomiting to get rid of the pomegranate seed inside her. Hades felt no guilt or remorse because one does not apologize to one's property. The woman couldn't believe her man had done this to her. By the time Hades regretted it, it was too late. The day the rumors started that Zeus had spent the night with the goddess, Hades thought it was his punishment. He was angry and thought that if he hadn't done that to Anna, things might have been different. Hades couldn't cross Zeus after all. He was the one who helped him with the kidnapping. Hades feared that he had led his child, whom he wished the best for, into a trap. Returning to his daughter's question, the father replied that he loved her and had never thought of Paulina as a replacement for her mother. Hades reiterated to Paulina that he loved her and said that he had never loved anyone as much as he loved her and wanted her to always stay by his side. The father said that he would have loved his daughter even if she wasn't Anna's daughter and didn't look like him in appearance. Hades told his daughter that he didn't think anything would change if he said that to her. He explained to his daughter that he had always loved her. Paulina cringed and said that it made a lot of difference, and if she hadn't heard that, she would have been miserable forever. The protagonist smiled and thanked her father for this conversation. The little goddess asked if that was where they were even going. Hades replied that it seemed to be in the wrong direction and told his daughter that she was being clever as always. At this point in the underworld, the fairies were discussing whether Pauline was left to live on Olympus. They thought it was cruel. Alexandra was passing by and happened to overhear this conversation. She said it couldn't be. Rumors spread about the little goddess. Alexandra thought that she should have shut Hermes up because he constantly sings a song about Olympus. The gods who patronized the protagonist knew that this day would come sooner or later. The gods discussed what they would do if Pauline really didn't come back. Thanatos said there was nothing they could do. If she didn't come, that would be the end of it. He was advised to do something about his dark circles under his eyes, but the man replied that he was just working hard. Edward said that he actually thought that the underworld was not the best place for a young goddess to grow up. Thanatos thought that he should have just gone after Paulina. Edward talked about the perpetually depressed Styx fairies and how for the little goddess here, instead of dolls, there were only skeletons, and the only entertainment, fighting and swords. Alice said it was even worse than she thought. Alexandra said that things weren't so smooth on Olympus either. The gods have come to the conclusion that it will be up to Pauline to decide where is bad and where is good. Hades hadn't arrived yet and had to wait first. Edward sipped silently from his glass. Alice said that she and Thanos were both pretending that everything was fine. The gods heard someone drive up and froze, waiting for the main character. The door opened and Pauline walked in, happily letting everyone know she was home. Alice and Alexandra hugged the girl and asked why she was so late, since they were waiting for her. Alexandra froze. She noticed that Pauline had puffy eyes, a wrinkled dress, and a strong odor of alcohol. The little goddess was asked why she looked like an alcoholic. The main character asked if she wasn't missed. Edward said that wasn't true, and they were very afraid that the little goddess would be left to live on Olympus. Alexandra took Pauline by the shoulders and reminded her that she was the face of the state, and her father Hades always appeared clean and well-groomed. The protagonist smiled and said that good things happened. The girl was asked about her impressions after visiting Olympus and asked to compare it with the underworld. Pauline said that Olympus was luxurious, and she even wanted to release a couple hundred swans into the river Styx. Edward reminded her that Adrian would be terrified of swans on the Styx. Everyone laughed. The protagonist said that she wanted to get some critters anyway. The gods gave their opinion on the critters and decided that it wasn't a bad idea. Pauline was told that something else had arrived before she got here. The little goddess shrieked with joy that it was a golden maiden, a gift from Hephaestus. It seemed to Hypnos, the god of sleep, that Pauline was more excited about the gift than her friends, who had been waiting for her intensely. Hypnos teased the little goddess and said that they had raised her, and she had traded them for a golden doll. Thanatos was called over, just for a few words, by his assistant, and spoke something in his ear. After those words, Thanatos turned to Pauline and said that they were talking about her doing something on Olympus. The girl said that she had just had a little too much to drink. Thanatos added that her feet had brought her to Zeus's room on their own. Paulina laughed and said that she hadn't been prepared for it to be known. Thanatos spread his wings and asked the protagonist to say her last words. Pauline replied that she was ready to endure the whipping. That's how the initiation of the little goddess ended. Not even 3 months have come since Pauline regretted her return to the underworld. Immediately after initiation, the gods must begin their duties. Pauline was searched all over the underworld, and she was hiding. The problem was that these duties were too many, and it was a great burden for the protagonist, but she had a bigger problem. Pauline sat on the floor and thought about the fact that the little goddess had decided to run away. She told herself that there was too much work to be done in a short time, and no way to escape. The protagonist turned her head and saw the golden doll that Hephaestus had given her. The doll swung her fist at Pauline, but she managed to dodge, and the golden doll punched the wall and said that they needed to go back and finish the job. The biggest problem for the main character was the golden maiden Violetta. The girls who were looking for Pauline started to run to the sounds. Violetta couldn't control her power. The protagonist told the golden maiden that they should run away soon. Violetta replied that her arm would not move. The girls found Pauline and Violetta, who was completely unadapted to life in the modern world. This girl was made of pure gold and was incredibly beautiful. The main character could not even guess how much soul Hephaestus put into her creation. Despite everything, a good first impression of Violetta was short-lived. The protagonist hid from Violetta in a closet and hoped that she definitely couldn't be found here. The palace was quite large, and Pauline hoped that she would not have time to go around it entirely. Violetta found Pauline and told her that while she was looking for her, she was already late. The golden maiden told the protagonist to go to work. She couldn't leave the little goddess alone and found her everywhere, in the toilet, on the roof, and in the bedroom when the girl tried to rest. Violetta crawled out from under the protagonist's bed and reminded her that she still had unfinished business. Pauline believed that these things she would not finish until the day she died. The golden maiden told the little goddess that she was immortal and had nothing to die of. The protagonist began to tremble and cry. Violetta asked if Pauline was crying, but she said no. The golden maiden did not know or understand at all what compromise was. The two girls who were looking for Paulina finally found her, but they saw a hole in the wall that made a huge crack. It became curious whether Hephaestus knew that the golden maiden was destroying the palace, which he had personally built. Pauline was taken away, and she shouted after Violetta that there was nothing in her but beauty. The golden maiden replied to the little goddess that it was not a compliment. Pauline screamed that she would run away from there as soon as she had the chance. The girls asked not to say such things in front of them. Thanatos appeared from around the corner, running towards Pauline. The little goddess didn't understand what had happened or why he was running like that. The words were spoken that Thanatos had brought Adonis. There is only one instance in which a living person comes to the underworld at the invitation of the god of death. Thanatos announced that Adonis had died. Pauline was shocked by this news. She remembered Adonis's words. He wanted to die just like this, young and beautiful. It was going to happen one day, and the protagonist expected it. However, Adonis died much sooner than the little goddess had anticipated. People act as if they will live forever, but in fact their lives are incredibly short. The main character was taken by the scruff of the neck and dragged somewhere. Pauline asked not to treat her like prey, but everyone knew perfectly well that if they let her go, she would run away. Now the little goddess didn't even know what might happen. In the underground court, the judge was giving his verdict and telling several people that they were guilty. A young man tried to say he was innocent. The judge had 3 heads and asked if anyone had any objections to his verdict. The guy replied that there were no objections. The judge banged his gavel a few more times and found the defendants guilty. They were then rudely told to get out of there as soon as possible and not to take up time. The protagonist was also present at the trial and wondered if the verdict could not be given to all of them at once. The judge looked at Pauline with his 3 heads and she apologized. The judge continued banging his gavel and saying the word guilty. Pauline noticed that they were all, as always, ears perked up and scary to the point of horror. The little goddess waited for Adonis's turn to stand trial. Pauline pondered what she would say to Adonis when she met him. The little goddess could tell him that he had died earlier than expected, and she could ask him if he regretted asking the little goddess not to resurrect him. Likewise, she wondered what expression Aphrodite had on her face. Thanatos told the protagonist that Adonis had volunteered first, and as long as Pauline avoided her duties, they had managed before the trial. The little goddess realized that this must be why the god of death had come here. He was asking Pauline not to be lazy. Thanatos said that there was something unforeseen, and when this Adonis came, it seemed that he would be noisy, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. Pauline supported her friend and told the god of death that he was as concerned as ever, for when someone dies, he always takes on a job. The protagonist saw a golden maiden enter the courtroom. Violetta said that Lady Demeter had invited Pauline to Elysium. The little goddess shrieked with joy, the patroness of the harvest, the goddess of the earth, and also Anna's mother, Demeter. Among all the gods, the one who treasures blood ties the most. She searched everywhere for her daughter Anna, for when she went missing, Demeter was greatly grieved. The goddess of the earth withdrew from plowing, and the earth became desolate, after which a long winter came to the earthly world. People and children were dying of hunger and cold. Zeus saw what was happening on earth, and it was obvious that at this rate all people would starve to death, and he decided to go to Hades. Zeus, who had hidden the fact that Hades had stolen Anna, did reveal his secret. By the time Demeter found her stolen daughter, Anna had already eaten the fruit from the underworld. She hugged her daughter and realized she was too late, and this was just entertainment for them. Demeter cried and wished she had realized everything sooner, but she was too weak to take revenge. Demeter promised she would never come to the underworld again, but she came again. Sometimes she still came down to see Anna and Pauline. One day, Demeter could tell the protagonist how beautiful she was and how much she looked like her mother, and the next day she would slap her and forbid her to even look at her, and even call her her daughter's unwanted child. The protagonist walked with Thanatos to Demeter and said that she was uncomfortable, for she was evil then good, and the little goddess did not know which side she would meet today. Thanatos advised her not to go to Elysium because she didn't have to accept the invitation. The protagonist said that since she had been invited, she saw no reason not to go. Thanatos noticed that the little goddess was holding a book with 100 notable places in Elysium. He assumed that Pauline just wanted to go there, and the protagonist didn't deny it. The protagonist said that Elysium was a place created especially for the souls of heroes, the only place of paradise in the entire underworld. The little goddess believed that if there was an opportunity to go there, it was worth taking it. Thanatos looked at Pauline carefully and intently, and she looked with wide-open, pleading eyes. The god of death told the girl to do as he wished. The little goddess jumped for joy and said that even if she got punched in the face, the important thing was that she would be in Elysium. Thanatos said if that's the case, it's better not to go there. Pauline said it was just a joke and ran off, saying goodbye to her friend. Thanatos told her to be careful, and when the protagonist left, he said he hoped she didn't get into a fight with anyone there. Suddenly, Pauline ran out of Elysium's door and was shaking all over. Thanatos asked in horror what had happened. The reason why the little goddess shrieked was only one. Elysium, where Anna lived, was so beautiful that it was impossible to hold back a scream. The protagonist walked on and did not hold back words of admiration for the local beauty. The glitter of gold, in Pauline's opinion, was even more beautiful there than on Olympus. The little goddess pondered that her mother looked at this beauty every day, and it was a wonderful place to ask her father for it. The little goddess saw the golden pears and picked a huge armful. The fairy hurried Pauline along, for Anna and Demeter were waiting for her. The protagonist was running away and eager to try everything. The door opened, and Pauline saw Demeter and Anna before her. First of all, the little goddess said hello to her mother and asked how she was doing. Anna was not pleased and told her daughter that she was very late. Pauline was glad that luckily there was no Adonis, because there might be bad rumors about 3 goddesses and 1 man. Demeter and Anna were sitting at a table drinking tea. The protagonist came closer and said hello also to her grandmother, who said hello in return and asked what the little goddess was doing lately. A cup of tea was placed in front of Pauline, and she told her that lately, all in work. Anna was very surprised, and it seemed to her that her daughter did not have much work. The protagonist replied that she didn't know and suggested that it was because the place on top was empty, and that was why she had more work. Anna asked the protagonist if she had any hobbies, and it was assumed that tea drinking or ikebana didn't interest her. The little goddess replied that when she has time, she likes to ride Cerberus or play with skeletons. The protagonist was told that these were not the best hobbies for a young goddess. Pauline replied that those hobbies aren't the worst either, so it's okay. Anna asked her daughter if she could guess what she was about to be asked to do. Pauline said that she couldn't know, because she didn't have the gift of reading minds. The little goddess twirled a cup in her hand and tea spilled onto the table. The protagonist asked her mother what she wanted to ask her. Bowing down to someone you've always despised isn't easy, especially when you're a goddess who's only been honored her whole life. Anna only said one word, and that was the name Adonis. The main character's mom had told her that Adonis had fallen into the underworld and asked her not to resurrect him. Pauline did not even assume that she would immediately honestly say, obviously, that mom is very dear to him. The little goddess asked if that was an order. Anna replied that it was a request, but it was better to listen when she asked. Pauline said it wasn't an order and hoped her mom wasn't going to push her. Demeter was clearly unhappy with the conversation she was hearing, and the fairies opened their mouths in surprise as well. Pauline asked if her mother was going to order her around, guided by her useless royal name, and asked Anna not to be misled. The little goddess said that even though she was still young, her status in the underworld was no lower than her mother's. Demeter clearly did not like the conversation. She stood up and slapped her hand on the table. The protagonist told her that these are the affairs of the underworld, and it is not in Zeus's jurisdiction. The protagonist reminded her grandmother that meddling in the affairs of a world not her own was under the ban for the gods. Anna said that this conversation is very interesting, if Pauline's words are to be believed. Then, according to the laws of the underworld, her pathetic authority should stand above her daughter's because she is the queen of the underworld. Anna looked pathetic. The protagonist thought her mother, oppressed, had lost her footing. However, when she saw her daughter, she always became cruel, and yet nothing she said the girl could not change. Pauline believed that her mother always regretted not killing her that day. But as much as her mother hated the little goddess, just as much as her father loved her. Only Hades called her by her name and would not erase her existence, so the girl felt she had to cling to that love. Pauline believed that if she didn't keep that love, there would be no point in her birth. She reminded Anya that she had given up her crown because she didn't want it, and had given up her throne and responsibilities, and now, all of a sudden, she was poking at her special powers. Pauline told her mother that if she considers herself a queen, she should know that she only has a shell of that status left, and the fact that she was able to share Adonis with the goddess Aphrodite is only because of her father. Pity and mercy can be a shield for protection, but at no time should it be made into a knife that can wound another. Pauline used to say that if she gives up her royal duties of the throne, she must also give up her royal power and authority. One day, the protagonist was communicating with the fairy of the underworld, and she asked when Anna would come here. Pauline asked if her presence was not enough. The fairy considered this question burdensome and said that the world reputation of the underground kingdom depends on the king and queen. Of course, Anna cared nothing for this. She disdained everything but what she herself desired. Pauline told her mother that if she craved retribution, let her put the knife's edge to her father. The protagonist brought her face close to Anna's and said she saw no reason why others should take on her anger or sorrow. Anna asked her daughter if she was really going to teach her now. The little goddess replied that she was just giving sound advice. Anna slapped her hand on the table with anger and told the protagonist that she was being very insolent. Demeter interrupted the conversation between her granddaughter and daughter and said that this was the place to end it. The protagonist watched what was happening and was surprised that her mother was so angry. Anna tried to explain to Demeter that she still had something to say, but in response, she heard that the servants saw everything, and if Anna continued to talk about her royal status, she would only raise her voice. The protagonist put her palms together and said that they had a wonderful conversation. Pauline stood up and headed towards the door. Anna stopped her daughter and asked if she was going to resurrect Adonis. The girl replied that Aphrodite had asked her to do so. The little goddess admitted that she had also thought about resurrecting Adonis, but she was lazy, so she would not do it, and let her grandmother decide the rest of the matters. Pauline headed for the door again, but before she left, she stopped and told her mother that her father, who had tied Anna to him in the guise of love, and she, who had locked Adonis in Elysium out of love, looked exactly the same in people's eyes. The main character said that unlike Anna, who avoids everything, Adonis just gave up and accepted it. Paulina's mom screamed that she is not like that, and she and Adonis love each other. She kept crying and talking about love, and Paulina had already disappeared behind the door. The only paradise in the underworld. Even though it is an enviable paradise, it is only good for those who long for an escape from reality. The little goddess was fishing with a rod when suddenly Hermes came in and told her that people were gossiping that she had a fight with Anna. Pauline replied that it had been a long time since they had seen each other, and if Hermes hadn't started the rumors, she would have been more welcoming. Hermes said that there were rumors that Demeter had turned the earth upside down and was very angry. Pauline said that they had just had an argument, but not a fight, and about the earth, it was just a small earthquake. Hermes said that he was worried, and the protagonist suggested that he was actually worried about his mom. Paulina worried that her friend wasn't worried about her at all. Hermes explained that he'd only liked Anna when he was little. The little goddess asked her friend to repeat the same thing in front of the river Styx. Hermes was curious about Hades's reaction. Pauline told him that her father had so much to do that he hadn't even heard about it. Hermes said that if he found out about it, Hades would soon find out too. He asked if the little goddess herself would tell about what had happened. Pauline said that her father was not that kind of man at all, and then fell silent and thought. The protagonist thought that her business with her mom was not over yet. Pauline pondered, and then suddenly cried out what she should do in case her father hated her. The little goddess wept. Hermes reminded her that she and her father decided everything after the ceremony, and he said that he loved his daughter. Hermes asked the protagonist why she was so scared. Paulina replied that even though Hades said he loved her, she was worried that she might be unloved after what she had said to her mother. Paulina asked her friend if he could help her with her facial expressions. Hermes told her that it was unlikely that love could pass from such a thing, and asked why the girl was so worried day after day. He told the little goddess to go to her father and talk again if she was so uneasy. The main character said that it's just been too long since Daddy loved Mommy. Pauline said it would be very infantile to ask whose side Hades would take. It seemed to the little goddess that she probably didn't want to know. But it only seemed that way. Hades' study is located in the most remote place of the main palace of the underground kingdom, and it is an indescribably beautiful place. Pauline talked herself into getting up the courage to ask her father and her mother the whole truth. The protagonist came to her father's study. On one of the shelves, the protagonist saw gold jewelry from a collection she had never seen before. This place seemed to the protagonist a cave of treasures. Pauline tried on a bracelet and decided that it looked better on her hand than on the shelf. The little goddess liked the jewelry very much. She assumed Hephaestus had created it. Pauline looked around and saw some green plant in a glass vase. The little goddess didn't know that Daddy liked to grow flowers. Judging by the artificially made light, he takes great care of this plant. Hades entered the study and asked what happened to the guard, for he was lying on the floor and there was a hematoma on his head. In the study, Hades did not expect to see his daughter. Now he realized that it was Pauline who had dealt with the guard. The little goddess smiled, apologized, and said that she herself did not notice how he fell. Hades asked his daughter not to beat the guard from now on, but just to warn him in advance about his visit. Pauline held behind her back a few leaves of the plant her father was growing in his office. Her father sat down to the protagonist and asked why she had come to his office. Pauline chose her words carefully. She wanted to ask who he loved more, her or her mother, but it was hard to ask such a question directly. In her mind, the little goddess spoke to her mother in Elysium. She also wanted to ask if her father was disappointed in her. Pauline couldn't find the words, and her father looked at her questioningly. The protagonist realized that she couldn't just say all this to her father, and said that she missed her very much, and that's why she came. Seeing the bracelet on his daughter's hand, Hades said she could have it if she wanted it. Her father told Pauline that she could have whatever she wanted and suggested she go look around. The little goddess thanked, but explained that that wasn't why she had come. The protagonist covered Hades's mouth with her hand and said she had something she wanted to ask. Pauline still found the strength and courage and asked her father who he loved more, her or her mother. The protagonist took her hand away from Hades's face and thought it was the end. Her father looked at the girl questioningly and then said he loved them equally. The little goddess wasn't satisfied with the answer and asked who he would save first if they were both in trouble. Pauline nervously clutched the fabric of her skirt. Her father asked if she had been hurt so badly by what had happened in Elysium. The protagonist was shocked that her father knew everything and covered her mouth with her hand in surprise. Hades admitted that he was aware of what had happened. He said that there had been an earthquake, and everything had been reported to him. Father knew that Anna had asked Pauline not to resurrect Adonis. The little goddess confirmed her father's words. Hades stood up quietly and went to sit down at the table. Pauline had already decided that she had acted foolishly because her father loves her mother so much. The girl was worried that Hades might get angry and exile her to Tartarus. The protagonist was very depressed morally, but her father put his palm on the girl's head and asked her not to tolerate if she was mistreated because of him. Hades said that they were just taking out the anger addressed to him, on the daughter, although she did not deserve this anger and malice. Pauline thought that now, if her mother started a fight, her father would tear her apart. But Hades thought that was too strong and bold a statement, but on the whole she was right. Now the little goddess felt much calmer and wished she had figured it all out sooner. Hades added that to answer his question, he probably would have saved Anna first. Paulina said it was because he loved Mom more after all. Dad said he couldn't state that and he wasn't sure. Hades admitted that of course he loves Anna, but that's not why he would save her, but because he feels guilty to her for everything he put her through. The father went on and said that if he didn't make it in time with his daughter's rescue and she drowned, he would rather die with her. The main character was in a stupor and thought this was strange. Hades said that if Anna died, he would accept it and move on with his life, but if Pauline died, he would not be able to live through it. The little goddess covered her face with her hand, and Hades thought her daughter was not happy with the answer, but she smiled and said she was pleased. Pauline, the goddess of resurrection, daughter of Anna and Hades. She was walking along the river Styx and called out to Hadrian, who, as always, was floating down the river and carrying the dead. The little goddess asked what he thought of someone willing to die for her. Pauline thought it was almost a direct declaration of love. Pauline marveled at her father's response, saying that she was his only and favorite daughter and he was willing to die for her. All this was as if in a dream. The protagonist was riding on the shoulders of one of the dead men. Adrian congratulated Pauline, and she finally realized what the love everyone was talking about was. The little goddess said that the power of love is indeed beautiful. Adrian said that even the one who didn't believe in love still talked about it. The main character worried about what might happen to Daddy if he completely forgot about his reputation because of his daughter. Adrian asked to remember Hermes and said that's exactly what would happen to him. He also reminded Pauline that she hadn't said anything at all about her trip to Elysium. The little goddess replied that she shouldn't have gone there and there was nothing there. Adrian wondered if Pauline had made any trouble there. The protagonist replied that maybe she'd gotten into a little trouble there, and maybe she hadn't. Adrian said that everything should be measured. The protagonist replied that she didn't want to be patient, and then regret it. Measure and patience are different things. The little goddess said that she brought something cool and showed a green twig. Paulina admitted that she'd found it in her daddy's office, but she didn't know what it was. Adrian suggested that it was a plant from the underworld. The protagonist asked why she hadn't seen this plant here before. Adrian wasn't even surprised and told her that Anna had cast a spell on it. Pauline was very surprised and even angry. She wanted to know why it happened like that, but Adrian only replied that it was a long story. The king of the underworld with an icy heart had stolen the daughter of the goddess of fertility and hidden her in his house, and it was his fault that a fierce winter had begun on the surface. People believed that the culprit of the winter was Hades and cursed him. They were exhausted and died of cold and hunger. Even if Olympus collapsed, Hades could not win Anna's love, for the heart of the goddess of spring had already become stone. Anna begged never to seek her out, but Hades would not listen. The goddess always considered him a source of unhappiness. The father of the protagonist could not make his beloved happy and constantly kept silent. Anna said that she would not have been so sad if she had not met Hades, and his heart of stone, little by little, began to crumble. One day, a fairy came to Hades and confessed that she loved him. She didn't ask for reciprocity, she just wanted him to be happy. The fairy had light blonde hair and bright, sparkling green eyes. She reminded him of the very one that God loved very much. This fairy was making a wreath for Hades. She was the most beautiful and had a smile that amazed him. She was like 2 drops of water like Anna and had fallen in love with him even before Anna destroyed his heart. But it was the fairy in love who was always there for him. However, one day, Anna told her husband that there were rumors that he had a special relationship with one fairy. Anna was surprised that he says he loves her, but he thinks about other women. The main character's mom asked Hades if her broken life wasn't enough for him. There was not an ounce of mercy in Anna's smile. Hades offered to kneel or kiss Anna's feet, but begged her to leave this fairy alone. The woman hoped he wouldn't say that and slapped Hades across the face. She recalled that when she had also begged him to let her go, he had pretended to be deaf and had bullied and intimidated her. Anna said that Hades was living happily now, but she couldn't let him be happy, because if she couldn't kill him, she could kill that fairy. Anna said that he didn't let her be happy, so he must be miserable too. It had been a long time since Hades had heard about the death of that fairy. Adrian told the story to Pauline, and she replied that it was sad. The little goddess said that she wished she could see her mom's face that she had spoken all those words to. Adrian thought it wasn't that important right now. Pauline said it was very important and wondered what this fairy had to do with the plant in Daddy's office. Adrian said it was called mint. The protagonist put the plant in her mouth and opened her eyes wide. Adrian said that mint grew on the grave of a murdered fairy, and Pauline spit the plant out sharply. Yes, Anna's anger only grew more fierce. Her body in pieces Hades collected from her and turned it into a plant. Anna didn't like that and wanted to get rid of the plant in the underworld. Adrian didn't know that Hades was growing this plant in his office. Pauline realized that her father had grown it himself and secretly tended it in his office. The protagonist assumed that her father had her mother in first place, the fairy in second, and only her in third. Adrian told the little goddess that she was jumping to conclusions too easily. Paulina reminded him that he himself had said that it was Fairy who had been Hades' mistress. Adrian explained that people didn't just become special to someone because of love. The little goddess said that there was something between them after all, which was why her mom had done that. Adrian said that focusing on the little things was something he and Hades were alike in. Paulina laughed and told her friend that he was just messing with her right now. The main character jumped up and landed right on Adrian's back. Paulina bit him on the back. The man asked him to let go and asked the girl not to take Hades' words about love as a frivolous joke, because he knows very well what he's talking about. After a while, the protagonist sowed the plantation with mint. Violetta was worried that Anna might come and something bad would happen. And Pauline said that Daddy had been kind to her lately. He wouldn't get mad if she pissed off Mommy a little. Turning her head, the protagonist saw some man who was heading towards her and carrying Cerberus on his shoulders. In addition, the protagonist could smell the odor of a living creature. The man stopped in front of the protagonist and Violetta and was surprised that Pauline did not know who he was. The guest told that his name was Hercules. He was born of Zeus and a human woman, breastfed by Hera, for which he received an immortal body and became a great hero. But for Hera, he was only an occasion of immorality. Decades later, in the temple of Hera, she sat on her throne and said that Hercules was her adopted son, and she breastfed him. He was her husband's illegitimate son and an Olympic hero. He was building a happy family. Hera was unhappy that he was living a happy life, and the goddess decided to drive Hercules crazy. Her plan succeeded. By the time he recovered, the murders had already been committed. Hercules was begged to wake up and not to give up, because there is a way to wash off this crime, and right now it is necessary to go to the Delphic temple and beg the gods for help. After coming to the gods and repenting of killing his family, he was given the task of completing 12 errands. These 12 errands were the 12 duties of Hera. He had already completed 11 errands. The last one was to catch Cerberus. The main character wasn't listening. She was hurt by the words about Hercules calling her baby. Pauline put her hands up and said that it was obvious that she was a goddess. She knew nothing about Hercules and the 12 feats. The main character said that the land world was very big and she might not know his name. Pauline decided that someone like him needed to be taught a lesson and channeled her power into him, but nothing happened. The little goddess was horrified and didn't understand why her power wasn't working. The goddess, who lived only in the underworld, of course could not know who Hercules was. Pauline said that Hermes had told her something about her younger half-blood brother, and that, for a human, he wasn't bad at divine matters. The protagonist said she wasn't at all surprised by Zeus's fertility. Hercules was bored, thinking that this girl was probably an inferior goddess, with no special powers, since she was talking about the 12 gods in such a flippant way. Pauline had said that if he was the son of Hera, it would be more interesting, but as it was annoying. Hercules wasn't sure that this girl was listening to Hermes exactly. He realized that judging by the fact that she had power, she was definitely a goddess. But goddess of what exactly remained a mystery. Hercules, continuing to hold Cerberus in his arms, decided that it was necessary to get out of there quickly. He asked Pauline if she was coming, but the little goddess said that they couldn't take Cerberus out of here without Hades' permission. Hercules admitted that Hades had allowed him to borrow him. He promised that he would return him as soon as he completed the task. Hades told Hercules that if he could carry the Cerberus, he could have it. Hercules said he was tough, and Hades recognized his strength too. Luckily, he didn't think he would actually carry him off with his bare hands. Hercules said that anyway, once he finished things, he would bring Cerberus back and asked the protagonist not to worry. Cerberus was placed on the floor and he didn't move. Pauline wanted to know what was wrong. There was a wall ahead, and Hercules said that he had completely forgotten the structure of this place and kept running into dead ends. The little goddess saw that he suddenly started warming up and asked what he was doing it for. Hercules was famous for something else as well. He smashed his fist through the wall. Pauline yelled for him to stop, but it was too late. Hercules never listened to what the gods told him. It was amazing that he punched through the wall with his hands. Pauline felt sorry because Hephaestus had worked so hard to build it and said it was one of his major masterpieces. He built almost everything in the underworld. The little goddess was indignant that Hercules decided to hollow out his exit. To this, he replied that he did it in order not to look for it. He took Cerberus by the tail and dragged him somewhere. The main character thought he was crazy. Hades had a sofa of oblivion, and anyone who sat on it would not be able to get out of the statement until they got up. However, if you do sit down, you can no longer get up, even through force. As a result, this place becomes a curse that you can't get rid of until you die. Of course, how could a person know about this if they only came to the underworld? Hercules picked up one of those sitting on that sofa and ripped his ass off, down to the meat. The protagonist was shocked that this was possible, and to see with her own eyes that no divine power could compare to the hero's brutal methods. Hercules also wanted to help the second man sitting on the sofa of oblivion. Pauline shouted that they can't do that, because he wants to take Anna as his wife, and they can't let this conspirator go. Hercules said he had no desire to help Hades' enemy. He said he had saved Theseus, and that was enough. Hercules leaned over to Theseus and asked if he was in any trouble. The unfortunate man replied that he felt as if he had been tortured and severely beaten. Pauline said that he was always making himself miserable. Hercules asked Theseus if he remembered who had done this to him. The culprit was Pauline, but the guy didn't remember that. However, Hercules looked suspiciously at the little goddess, as if he assumed something. The protagonist decided to help Theseus a little. His face was restored, and his butt was no longer bleeding. The guy talked about how the underworld was indeed a wondrous place. There were spirits flying behind Theseus who could smell the odor of a living person. He worried if they were dangerous. Pauline replied that she didn't know the details of how spirits treat living people. Theseus didn't seem too happy with that answer. He caught up with Hercules, who was dragging Cerberus by the tail, and said they would go together. The little goddess shouted after him that Theseus was a coward. Hercules called Pauline small and asked her to be quiet. He asked the protagonist how long she would follow them. Theseus noted that Hercules is quite harsh in his statements. The protagonist said that he constantly calls her baby or little and asked if he was tired of it. Pauline also told Hercules that even though he has 100 years of life under his belt, he dare not be rude to her. The little goddess laughed and said that when Hercules became old and infirm, he would come crawling to her for help himself. When Pauline opened her eyes, she saw that Hercules was gone. Theseus explained that he saw a way out and ran to it. Theseus didn't want to interrupt Pauline's speech as Hercules left. They were also followed by the golden maiden Violetta, who asked the little goddess if she was going to follow them forever. The protagonist replied that this was exactly what she was going to do until she got bored. They came to a place where the path between the two worlds was located. It was from there that a golden light emanated, which was nowhere else in the underworld. Pauline stood at the entrance where the golden glow shimmered and didn't know where it would lead. All the little goddess wanted was no regrets and a fun first adventure. Theseus asked the protagonist if she could heal his ass. In her temple, Aphrodite suffered and talked about being first and having her man taken away from her. The goddess said that if Anna wasn't the queen of the underworld, she wouldn't even let her look at him. Aphrodite sat on the floor and conducted her monologues. Her son came up behind her and called out to her. The goddess turned her head and said that her favorite son had come. Long ago, the Moiras predicted that the children of Gaia, half-human, half-snakes, giants, would break into Olympus. Only one, born from the union of Zeus and an earthly girl, would be able to resist them. And so Hercules was born. What the Moira predicted is impossible to avoid, even for the gods. Hades came to Zeus and told that Hercules came and borrowed Cerberus. The king of the underworld did not think that man could stand up to Cerberus. Zeus laughed and said that he was a hero to lead them to war, and he was different. He said that Hera had distinguished herself as well, for she had given him 12 errands at once. In fact, Zeus already knew what Hera wanted. Hera told Hercules that if he was the hero whom the Moirs called the savior of Olympus, then with these errands he should easily cope. Hera knew that Hercules would have to stand at the head of a real battle. He had to perform 12 deeds, impossible for a man to do, in order to win. Hades couldn't understand if Zeus was just going to take pity and watch from the sidelines. The protagonist's father asked Zeus if he thought he was being too frivolous. Zeus said that they needed a hero, and so he created Hercules. He saw nothing wrong with doing it to a beautiful woman. Hades said it was ungodly, but anyway, asked him to warn Hercules not to get on the god's nerves by doing his tasks. Zeus thanked him for his concern and asked him to stop by Olympus more often. He promised to give Hades beauties that would help him forget Anna. Hades sat in his throne. In front of him stood Adrian, Thanatos, Alexandra, Alice, and Edward. The king spoke of some human being taking the princess away with him. He was referring to Pauline, who had gone missing. Hades said that such a thing happened, but everyone just sat still. Hadrian said that he had received instructions from Hermes and protection from the goddess Athena, and it was reckless of him to put a living man in a boat and carry him across the river Styx. Hades replied to Hadrian that for this act, he was sentencing him to the punishment of a year on iron chains. Alexandra tried to intercede on Hadrian's behalf and said what could happen in a year in the underworld. The king replied to the goddess that he gave her no right to interfere in the conversation. Adrian told everyone that they, by being inactive in a situation like this, did not feel they had a role to play in Pauline's absence here. To Thanatos and Edward, Hades promised to give his helmet to help keep people out of sight. Hades ordered to find the princess by any means necessary. Pauline and Hercules, the Golden Maiden, and Theseus were on the cliff burning a fire. Theseus said he didn't expect the little goddess to go outside with them and thought it was a joke. The protagonist said that underground everyone called her beautiful, and he shouldn't think of her as a chatty little thing. And to someone like him, she just had to show all her greatness. The little goddess said that when he needed help, he would crawl to her on his knees and beg for help, but she would just walk away. Theseus laughed and said he was scared. Good thing Hercules was asleep at that moment. Pauline said that she herself was curious to be here. She became curious about it after she visited the court after the initiation ceremony. The little goddess didn't know what they were all crying about, and after a while they would get used to living in the underworld like everyone else. The little goddess understood that the dead could not forget their earthly life. They couldn't throw away the things they used when they were alive. They weren't used to living underground and would always miss living on the surface. The main character explained that this was why she went with them, even though it was impulsive. Pauline lay on the ground and looked up into the sky, a bright, warm fire burning at her feet. The little goddess looked up into the sky and thought about how beautiful it was, and even though they didn't shimmer like diamonds, it was still very beautiful. Pauline thought that starry sky resembled her daddy's hair. It was beautiful, but the main character's heart ached. Pauline felt bad for leaving without saying anything to Daddy, but she was always peculiar and thought that nothing bad would happen. Hades was literally ruined by her daughter's escape. Corinthos. To confirm that Hercules has completed all 12 errands, he needs to show the king of Corinthos Cerberus, and then they will be considered complete. Of course, he still has a long way to go to Corinthos. Hercules continued on his way and asked Theseus if he could talk about anything other than stories about heroes, since he had been in the underworld for a long time. Theseus replied that he had been sitting in the chair of oblivion all that time. Hercules was angry and asked Theseus to think of something, for he was bored. He replied that when he got to the underworld, Hadrian told him the story that Hades had a daughter. Hercules heard about it for the first time. Theseus told him that the daughter of the king of the underworld had never been to the surface. Hercules asked if she was beautiful. Theseus knew that question would come out. He replied that jocks like pretty girls. Hercules was defiant and said that if this was Anna's daughter, she couldn't have an ugly face. Hercules didn't listen at all to what Theseus was telling him and pondered the fact that Hades' daughter could be like her father, and gloomy and menacing girls were not exactly his type. Theseus said that Hercules might not be her type either. After thinking for a bit, Hercules and Theseus turned around and looked at Pauline. The little goddess said they should have realized this back when Hercules was wrecking the palace. The culprit of the celebration always comes first. Hercules talked about how he immediately realized that such a little girl could be a goddess of the underworld. Pauline said that perhaps he didn't understand because he was a dummy. Hercules was very angry at the words he heard. Pauline suggested that he repeat again what he had said before. Hercules took a swing at the girl, and Theseus said that he shouldn't do that, because she was the daughter of Hades. Of course, Pauline was not Hades himself. Hercules said that the little goddess did not show her powers in any way, and he could not know that she was a goddess. It wasn't long before Pauline was resentful, and it seemed like they were going in circles. Hermes told the protagonist that if according to her she was a goddess, she must know how to find the way herself, and she could call up some road spirit or something. Hercules couldn't believe that there were such goddesses who didn't know all this stuff. Pauline admitted that she had just forgotten and said it was no big deal. She asked Hercules not to be deceived and promised that when he died, she would send him to Tartarus. Hercules told the protagonist that she couldn't do anything to him in her lifetime either, and when Pauline died, he would bury her under a tree root. The protagonist laughed and replied that she would crush him even sooner. Theseus tried to stop this verbal altercation and said that now was not the time to quarrel, and they had business to attend to. Pauline sank her teeth into Hercules' shoulder. Theseus tried to bring up the issue of how much provisions they had. The protagonist said she had a lot of money and jewelry in her room, but they didn't have any right now. Hercules said they couldn't just take it all away by force. The little goddess asked Hercules what her mom would say about him being a thief. In response, Pauline heard that after he killed his teacher as a child, his mom never says anything else to him. Theseus thought that both the thief hero and the daughter of Hades, and even the Golden Maiden, were a problem, but with a monster like Cerberus, they were unlikely to be allowed into the city at all. Hercules suggested cutting off the golden Violetta's finger. Pauline was outraged and said that if even a hair fell from her head, she would kill them all. Hercules offered to at least take off her clothes. The little goddess said that if he was going to sell anything, it would be his bear skin. While Theseus was in thought, they were surrounded by men who let loose arrows from their bows, telling them to throw their weapons on the ground and give up everything they had. One of the attackers was saying that everywhere you go, there were Herculeses making a fool of themselves. It was a gang of thieves called the Black Hurricane. The attackers looked at Theseus. He looked like someone the bureaucrats would go crazy for, and Hercules looked like someone the aristocrats would go crazy for. The most expensive thing, this Pauline, stood aside, and the thieves thought they could offer her even to the king. The attackers laughed and said that this girl was better than the ones they had sold before and looked like a goddess. Hercules tossed Cerberus toward the gang. Pauline asked why he threw him. Theseus thought it would be bad if he killed them, and it was better to just scare the thieves into running away. The protagonist said they couldn't run away and they couldn't let rumors spread. The leader told his gang to ignore the monster, it doesn't matter, and to think about money. Hercules said there were quite a few attackers left, and Pauline, smiling slyly, offered to raise money. Snow-white skin and a small face, her resplendently beautiful appearance had some unknown appeal. One of the thieves said that the girl was going to get naked anyway, and why not enjoy it? Because with looks like that, even if she was still a girl, it would be fun. Theseus and Hercules fought off the attackers. Sure, they have a difference in skills, but they couldn't win against this gang so easily. This gang was very numerous. Theseus saw Hercules literally multiply one of the attackers with a club. It was very messy all around. Everything was covered in blood. It was strange that they still didn't realize that Hercules was in front of them, because he was literally in the skin of a bear. The attackers took Pauline hostage and held the sword at her throat. They promised to kill the girl if they were not listened to. Hercules said that if she was a commodity, they wouldn't kill her, and besides, they weren't too close to her. Theseus asked Violetta if she would rescue the little goddess. The Golden Maiden replied that she would not take action without her permission. The situation was very dangerous. Violetta shouted to the little goddess whether she should be rescued or not. After the protagonist replied, 3.02 seconds had passed, and in that short time, the Golden Maiden had blown their heads off, all of them. Pauline had said that when there was an attraction to the gods, those thoughts were made known to the pantheon. Pauline watched this gang closely, and they really thought about it. They had once gotten a married woman they wanted to have fun with, then give her to a slave trader or kill her or burn her. The heroine felt that these people were dirty to the bone, and if they raised a hand against her, they should learn a lesson. The gods can easily kill a man. If we talk about Zeus, he, not even throwing lightning bolts but just showing himself in front of people, is able to kill a human with just heat. And of course, for a goddess with the power of resurrection, killing a human is like snapping a finger. The little goddess did just that, and the whole gang of thieves dropped dead. Hercules was a little shocked at what was happening. He had seen many deaths in war, but this was the first time he had seen someone die from a single gesture. There is no immortality without resurrection. For the main character, death was so commonplace that it made even a hero like Hercules shake with fear. Obviously, a little goddess can take someone's life very easily. Theseus said he was numb, and asked if it was a hereditary skill. Pauline replied that it's something like Zeus's lightning bolts, and he doesn't use them always, or else the order would be disturbed. But the death of this gang by God's punishment wouldn't disturb anything. The little goddess asked if Theseus had seen one of the thieves looking at her. The protagonist, along with the Golden Maiden, headed onward, and Hercules asked if they just wanted to escape from the murder scene. Pauline explained that she didn't want to meet Thanatos, because the angel of death would come after the dead and notice that it was her doing, and she didn't want to go back to the underworld yet, because she enjoyed the adventure. Hercules spread his arms and laughed and said he didn't like this adventure. The little goddess laughed back. Theseus and the Golden Maiden went forward, and Pauline and Hercules began to fight. Theseus announced that they had already reached the gate, the death-giving goddess of resurrection, Hercules, the fiendish hero. Pauline clung to the hero, and he begged the little girl to let him go. Soon these two will cause the disappearance of an entire kingdom. Hercules' mother, the previous Mycenaean queen, is the eldest daughter of Electryon. The father, a Mycenaean general, meaning Hercules is the son of royalty. At least that's what they think. Pauline said Mycenae has elegant fortress walls. Theseus laughed and said that such do not even want to break, and unlike the underground kingdom, this fortress is quite small. Hardly on the surface there is a structure comparable to the palace of the underground kingdom, and although for Pauline, even the palace of the underground kingdom was just another tower. Hercules said they were following him if they didn't want to crash into the stone lions. People cheerfully greeted the great Mycenaean hero and asked what brought him here. Some were horrified that the bully had returned. Hercules was angry and asked if he needed a reason to come back here. The Mycenaean gatekeeper replied that it wasn't like that at all, and they were insanely glad he had taken the time to visit them. Theseus explained that he was the one responsible for the Lion's Gate. Pauline noticed that the gatekeeper had a face like a mouse. Hercules explained that he was on a mission and needed to go to Corinthos and asked for directions. He also said that he planned to go into the capital and asked for everything to be prepared. The gatekeeper was kind of apprehensive, but said he would get everything ready. The gatekeeper asked what to do about those who came along with Hercules. The hero replied that they were his companions and they would make do. Hercules was promised to prepare a carriage. Pauline was very angry. The protagonist asked what would happen afterwards. Theseus said that, in the end, the Lion's Gate became the standard of an impregnable fortress. The little goddess also wanted to ask, what was that big stone visible from the carriage window? Theseus told her that it was called Tholos, a domed crypt, and in it were buried the Mycenaean royal family and aristocracy. Pauline concluded that if Hercules died, he would be buried there too, since he was a member of the royal family. Hercules had earlier said that he came from Thebes, but if his parents were Mycenaeans, then why was he born in Thebes? Theseus revealed that Hercules' parents were banished from the Mycenaeans. Although Hercules' mother was a Mycenaean princess, her husband, trying to catch a bull, threw a spear and accidentally hit his father-in-law, the Mycenaean king, after which the couple were banished from the city. Of course, Pauline could not know about such details. The protagonist said that the gatekeeper was happy about the arrival of Hercules. When a city has at least one hero, its status in the country increases. So the gatekeeper said that this is the birthplace of the hero Hercules. Even though he was born in Thebes, he has Mycenaean blood running through him. The protagonist realized that his life was hard. Theseus explained that this is why Mycenae and Thebes have a strained relationship. Thebes realized too late about Hercules and now looks badly on Mycenae. Mycenae and Thebes are fighting daily to award themselves a hero. Pauline tried to understand why he would choose Mycenae, since his parents were banished from them. Theseus said that children are not always so attached to their parents. The little goddess said that she is forever being judged by her lineage, so there are all sorts of things that happen. Hercules said angrily that they were making a fuss and asked Pauline if she was definitely the goddess of resurrection and not the goddess of asking questions. She asked why he even cared. Hercules banged his fist near Pauline's head and said that since she was the goddess, she should find out for herself if his parents abandoned him because he was a bully, or if he was a puppy without blood and tears. He told her to look at his memories on her own and find out everything. Paulina said she was so lazy and there was no need to do that because there was someone who would tell it all. Hercules said that, in that case, the gods are nothing. The little goddess took Hercules' hand and said that she should have killed him along with those men. Hercules replied to the girl that she could not raise her hand on her chosen hero. The quiet ride did not work out. Theseus watched from the side what was happening, from his eyes tears, and on his face was a smile. The search team found the gang killed by Pauline. Thanatos couldn't believe that one little goddess had exterminated so many people, and it was likely that it was a goddess with similar abilities. The discussion at the scene was that certainly among the gods there were those who could reincarnate as a child. However, there was something else. The dead said they had seen a three-headed monster and a talking statue of a golden girl. It could very well have been Pauline. They stubbornly followed in the footsteps of the protagonist. Pauline wondered why she couldn't kill the protagonist. It was explained to the protagonist because they were born with a special purpose. If you kill an ordinary person, nothing will happen. But if the hero does not fulfill his mission, the thread of fate can become entangled. The protagonist thought that what the Moira and Zeus came up with was very horrible. Theseus asked if he fit the criteria of a hero. The little goddess replied that of course he did, because he was an Athenian hero. Now he didn't have to worry about dying at the hands of a goddess. Pauline couldn't believe it. Did she really look like someone who wanted to kill him? The little goddess decided that she would be kinder from now on. When the heroes reached their destination, they were greeted joyfully in Mycenae. Hercules and crew looked very suspicious. Besides, there was some incomprehensible huge beast behind them. The butler said he would find them a bed for the night. Even though they were going to Tirinthos, they were well served in Mycenae, and Pauline assumed it was all because of Hercules. Theseus explained that it was probably because of the ruler of Tirinthos and Mycenae, two regions simultaneously ruled by one man. This man lives in Tirinthos but was on his way to them. Theseus said that they couldn't go there together anyway. Pauline asked Theseus if the people of Athens had forgotten him, for he was their hero. The little goddess said it was the first time she had ever seen anyone follow a friend into the underworld. Now, Pirithoi was left alone. Theseus said that when he woke up he didn't realize, and anyway, more time had passed than he thought, and it was necessary to return to Athens sooner rather than later. The servants came up behind the little goddess and called her Hercules' companion and said they would take her to water treatments. Pauline was indignant and said that she did not need help in washing, but the servants said that they had prepared for her a body massage with gold, and the little goddess gladly agreed. Hercules watched from the side and said that goddesses are very fond of gold. The servants told Hercules that they could not take Cerberus to Corinthos because all the men refused to do the job, and the carriage broke under such weight, and they were looking for another way. Hercules told the royal family to build a carriage. He told Theseus that they would have gotten there faster on foot if it weren't for Cerberus's poisonous saliva. Hercules looked down from the terrace and saw Pauline there at the stalls. Theseus told him that Paulina was bored sitting in her room and was obviously interested in looking at different people. Hercules was amazed by Pauline because she was completely different from the other gods. Usually, gods perceive people as ants. But the little girl from the underworld, unlike others, even having such a high conceit, looked at the world with the eyes of a curious child. Hercules remembered the words of the little goddess. In the carriage, she said that she couldn't kill him, but she could traumatize him badly. She was either stupid or merciful. Theseus noticed that Hercules was hesitating. They looked down and saw Pauline talking to some suspicious people. The salesman was showing the protagonist's shoes and claimed they belonged to Hermes. Pauline looked at them closely and realized that he had indeed lost his shoes. Theseus and Hercules hoped that the little goddess would notice this obvious deception.